say a prayer, gonna pay my dues. I've been running wild ever since I left Virginia, trying to find a face that might be mine.
Yeah, the only person on time was not me. My bad. Yeah. My bad, guys. A bit late. About 50 minutes late. My bad, guys. Sorry. How you guys doing?
Hey guys.
I need to quickly. This over here. Actually, I don't need this. Need this though. I said that where's it? I think I'm ready. Are you ready, Sloth? This is fun. While I get ready. Is this a really good song? Was that it? I don't care about copyright right now.
Hello everyone, my name is Stevie.
Yeah, it's a video. Damn, my throat hurts so bad. Alright, let's see, what video did we end off on? Crap. We watched that. I think we ended off at 90. Yeah, because we watched this. We're on 90 right now. Okay, you guys do have sound. What did I maybe have to call in later? What do I have? We have to go in like 30 minutes. Oh my god, it is Springtrap. How you doing, Springtrap? Oh shoot, I just realized it's not playing for my headphones, it's playing for my TV. I was wondering why it wasn't in my ear. There we go.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, the show that is definitely the real deal and not a sentient robot designed to copy my voice.
Oh, well, what's your favorite
Today we begin our
animatronic
journey to solve the
doggo?
most anticipated DLC of the year, Security Breach Ruin. Gotta admit, this DLC has been fantastic. Playing it really felt like Steel Wool learned from their mistakes. Gone is the open world that was big but empty. Gone is the brightly lit neon environments that stopped being scary. And gone are the insane
I woke up, saw it was 10 o'clock for me, and I jumped up my computer. Hello, Foxy. Yeah, I just jumped up my computer to instantly start streaming.
This definitely feels like we've skipped something. I think we broke the game.
I think I broke the game for like the 3rd time.
Oh my god, that hurts so bad.
To be on my first playthrough, I managed to skip an entire chapter that was filled with
what are you doing in there, no funny?
Consider that my contribution to the speedrunning community. You can call that one the failed lore hunter skip in my honor. It'll be my crowning achievement in the world of gaming. Just to make sure that we're all starting on the same page, in the game we play as a new character named Cassie, a young girl that's been called to the Pizzaplex by her friend and my personal favorite, maybe definitely robot kid, Gregory. Gregory tells us through a Roxy talkie that he's trapped under the sinkhole in Roxy Raceway. One staff bot jumps here later and we're handed a quote-unquote security mask, one that's meant to help us bypass certain puzzles while shutting down all the security doors that are keeping Gregory locked down in the basement. But this, my friends, is not just any mask. This is Vanny's mask, the one that Vanessa wore throughout the entirety of Security Breach, making it pretty darn suspicious. Using this mask allows allows us to look into an augmented reality system, seeing things that we couldn't see
Bro
before.
was
The humor is
leaning
invisible
over,
to certain
staring at
enemies.
it.
We can suddenly walk through walls, deactivate security nodes, intentionally teleport, and as I demonstrated earlier, also accidentally teleport sometimes. Mask in hand, we make our way through the Pizzaplex, shutting down the security and encountering the various glamrock animatronics from the original game, including the bestest boy glamrock Freddy, though something's a little different about him this time. I can't quite put my finger.
So the no, he's a prototype. I was gonna say, so the canon ending is the ending where Freddy turns bad, which I forget which one that is. I think it's the one where you stay. Because Freddy turns against you.
On it. It's probably the fact that he's missing his
But
head. All of this
prototype.
while running from a glitching bunny entity that'll summon animatronics to our location if we wear the
Oh my
Vanny
god,
mask
we already figured out the name. His name literally empty.
for too long. Eventually, we deactivate all the
but,
security nodes, including Cassie's
Benny,
favorite
Springtrap,
glam
no
rock,
Ben,
Roxy.
Springtrap.
Cassie, what are you doing?
Good God.
Sorry.
This allows us
Canon
to head
one
on
is
down
a
to the
3-star
basement
one?
where,
Yeah.
surprise,
what I
surprise,
thought.
it wasn't Gregory at
Which
all.
one's the 3-star one
Instead,
again?
it was an animatronic. See, told you guys Gregory was a robot this entire time. This thing right here is the Mimic, a bot designed to learn from and copy other people and robots. And whoopsie poopsie, we've just released it from its concrete prison. We run to the elevator to try to escape, only for the real Gregory to finally contact
strong.
us and lead us to safety. The elevator is ultimately sabotaged by either Gregory or the Mimic, unclear who exactly. That's a theory that we're going to talk about later. And we fall into the game's ending with Cassie's fate being questionable at best. Honestly, there is so much happening in this game. True to form, the fanbase is just tying itself into knots, arguing over all the little details. Did Gregory actually betray us in the end? What does the word prototype mean on Freddy's foot exactly? And what ending of Security Breach actually led us to this point in the timeline? Well, good news there, loyal theorists. I believe I have at least the first...
Oh, I seen someone play this one, I think, where Gregory is talking, unless that's a different game. Poppy's Playtime Chapter 3 where the girl was talking to you. But I don't know. Springtrap, you're not gonna get banned because I'm the only one who can do that, and I'm not banning you, by the way. You're
batch
good.
of questions answered, and oh boy, if I'm right, this game is drawn from one of the most controversial parts of the lore, while simultaneously setting us
No
up
funny,
for some
I
massive
can't
reveals
do
later this
anything
year.
about
So grab your AR
giving you
bunny
your
masks,
account back.
friends.
You
We're
know
about
the
to
email.
see the hidden truth
I-
buried.
Yes,
within
I have
the ruin. But
your
before I
account
do that,
access,
you know
but-
what complements a high-tech bunny mask?
What do you
Our
want me to do?
latest batch of theoryware. That's right. After almost a year's hiatus, we are back with a bunch of brand new designs.
No
and our
merch.
biggest drop
Ooh,
yet.
that's kind of a
Get
cool hoodie. I wouldn't wear it. Or jacket.
a year's
this one.
hiatus, we are back with a bunch of brand new designs.
This is pretty cool. I wouldn't wear it personally, but it's pretty
in
cool.
our biggest drop. After all, you know what, friends? We're about to see the hidden truth
Family.
buried within the ruin. But before I do that, you know what complements a high-tech bunny mask? Our latest
What?
batch of theoryware.
There's no way this guy literally just went back. Unless I went back by accident and still going forward.
Theory grew. Now that hell, what there it is from dead. Get ready to get lost in a radioactive full. It's to create a look YouTube right description and a
Do not
Which
use
of this-
IQ codes. It'll give your phone a virus.
Security Breach endings is
That is
canon.
Freddy
Security
Bet.
Breach
Who's
has had
Fred
a weird
Bez?
relationship with its endings. Sure, some previous
Who's
FNAF games
Fred
have had
Bez?
multiple endings, some have even had upwards of 7, but none has ever been so vague about what the intended
Yo, there is
ending
no
would be.
way I'm gonna
Had
sit
upwards
through friggin' FNAF 6 to get all of these. There's no one gonna be like I can get bankruptcy. I don't know what an insanity is. But I can easily get bankruptcy and the one without animatronics. Blacklist is insanely hard. I don't know how to get mediocrity, core keeper, completion, or insanity. I don't know what these ones are.
upwards
There's
of 7,
no way
but
I'm gonna
none
sit through
has
that
ever been so
and
vague
just
about
get
what the intended ending
all of
was.
those.
Of Security Breach's 6
That'll
potential
work.
endings, there were 2 that felt
You're
like
gonna airport
real
anymore? Okay.
contenders for being the canon choice. The so-called true ending, 2-star ending where Gregory goes into the
Oh.
Pizzaplex's basement to fight Burntrap, ending in a collapse of the entire building, and the Princess Quest ending, the only 3-star ending of the game where Freddy's dismantled by staff bots and Gregory defeats the Glitchtrap virus controlling Vanessa. So now that ruins out which actually happened, well, Well, we could say with near 100% certainty that it was Princess Quest. You see, Steel Wool did something that I would have never expected. They made the comic book style drawings of all the security breach endings into the linchpin of the whole
Your father knows about saving money. Everything I'm wearing, I've had since boot camp.
debate.
Are we collecting the endings from Security Breach as comics?
Yep, throughout Ruin, one of our main collectibles are comic strips. Comic strips depicting images from the base game's
Wait,
various
this is the new DLC, right? Yeah.
Comics that were created by none other than...
It's one of Gregory's comics.
Each comic comes with a little descriptor like that. These look like Gregory drew them. Gregory should be an artist when he grows up. Gregory was always so creative. That last line about Gregory being creative, that tells me that these endings are all made up. They're just stories that Gregory imagined for his own little comic series, inspired by the scary, true-to-life events of the franchise. But if they're made up, then how do we know that the Princess Quest ending is real? Well, once you collect all of Gregory's comics, the answer is pretty obvious. Take a look at this. These two are from the Gregory Escapes ending. These two are from the VIP ending. These are from the loading dock ending.
Wait a minute. You said from the Gregory Escapes, but look, Gregory getting chased by Gregory. Whoa.
The Gregory Escapes ending. These two are from the VIP ending. These are from the loading dock ending. This one is from the disassemble Vanny ending. And then last but not least is the burn trap ending panel. Seems like a pretty extensive list, right? Except there's one ending that's noticeably absent here. Princess Quest. There isn't a single comic strip in all of Ruin depicting that ending, implying that that one, unlike all the others, was real. And if you look around at the rest of Ruin with this in mind, you start to realize why. In the Princess Quest ending, you have to beat the Princess Quest 3 arcade machine that's in Vanny's hideout. But when you visit that same hideout in Ruin, you find the machine on its side, with the princess's lantern sitting on top of it. She has conquered the virus, lighting the way to freedom. And if the lantern wasn't obvious enough symbolism for you, when you put on the Vanny mask and enter the AR world, you'll see the sword from Princess Quest 2 and 3 plunged into the machine. The beast has been slain. Actually, the fact that Cassie's given the Vanny mask in the first place also lines up with this ending, because it's the only ending where we actively see the mask getting left behind. It's actually a big focus of this panel right here, showing us that the mask being left behind is significant. It's still waiting around for someone, in this case Cassie, to find it and become the new Vanny. And then, last but not least, there's the fact that in Ruin we come across Freddy, sitting in a pile of rubble, missing his head. Something that, again, only happens
it didn't tell me that you subbed. I don't know when you subbed me, bro.
So with our canonical ending established, let's just stop right there to talk a little bit more about Freddy, shall we? In Ruin, we come across this headless Freddy, but it's unclear whether it's meant to be our Freddy from Security Breach or not. You see, this Freddy has the word prototype written across his foot, something that is definitely not present in the base game. He also has a green present hiding in his stomach, something that's awfully suspicious once you consider Security Breach started with Gregory taking an orange present out of Freddy's stomach. This can't possibly be the same robot then, right? This is one of the big debates that's captured the attention of the Faz base. If the Princess Quest ending is correct, then it kinda has to be the same Freddy. It would be very highly coincidental if not. So how then do you explain all these new features? Well, first, I think it's important to call out that design updates between games, it is nothing new for this franchise.
Yeah,
probably
look at
known example
Springtrap.
of this is the evolution of Springtrap in FNAF 3.
Yeah, he's finally talking about it! Made me so excited I clicked somewhere. My bad. I just got excited because this dude has not talked about Springtrap evolution and how it's different ever. I skipped the video. I didn't skip it. I just rewound. I did skip it. Is this where we were? No. Where were we?
See that I have two really big monitors on here, as well as my tower, which by itself weighs like 50.
The day's finally here. 5 Nights at Freddy's Security Breach Ruin has arrived after a year and a half.
Oh, doggo, the reason why we were seeing that one is because I accidentally skipped this one.
One final chance to solve Security Breach once and for all before Ruin clarifies everything for us. Or, you know, just adds even more layers of confusion.
God, we gotta wait for that.
So, can I do it? Can I give you the theory that'll finally pull together everything and unite the very fragmented fan base in time for the newest game release? Let's find out. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory! And you heard that intro right, the Ruined DLC is finally out. In fact, it just dropped today as I upload this video, which is kind of crazy to think about, because it means that we've spent the better part of 2 years trying to solve one game and one game only, Security Breach. But all that time hasn't just been us spinning our wheels over and over again in Roxy Raceway, we've had ourselves some help. Kinda. Since the release of Security Breach, it's felt like the new Tales of the Pizzaplex books have been trying to offer us clues as to what the story of Security Breach was trying to be. But those clues have been, challenging for the community to interpret, to say the least. Mimics and Tiger Rocks and Dr. Rabbits, the storyteller Edwin GGY, the list has been huge, and even if you follow every detail of every book, it's still pretty darn confusing. But finally, with the release of this latest book, Tiger Rock, everything has come into focus for me. I think I finally get it. I think I finally understand the story that modern FNAF as a whole has been trying to tell us this entire time, which, you know, is kind of a good thing, because it'll put us all on the same page as we try to theorize moving forward. This theory, I suspect, is the final key to the puzzle, the thing that's gonna help us all understand what the heck we're seeing throughout the new DLC and from this point forward in the franchise. And I suspect it all comes down to one topic: AI. Now, obviously AI has been the buzzword of 2023, talking about how powerful it is, fears about it taking our jobs, concerns about the ethics of it. If you read an article online, there's a chance that it's been written by ChatGPT. See some cool artwork that just won a competition? Turns out Dolly made it. Watch a cool YouTube video?
Geez, MatPat, you're using a lot of power. You wouldn't last 1 minute playing 2020 mode, which I totally beat on my first try, by the way.
There's a chance that those voices were produced by AI. But for all the talk about it, what exactly is AI? Basically, artificial intelligence is a machine's ability to think like a human. You feed the machine a bunch of data, and the computer brain is able to learn from it. It ingests all that information and then makes decisions based on that data moving forward. It actually closely parallels the way that we learn. We also ingest data from our environment and then use that data to make our decisions. And just like with a human, the more data that you're feeding into these things, the more sophisticated and well-rounded the responses become, and the more lifelike it seems. Well, within reason. You see, there's a problem with all of this. You have to be careful about the data that you're feeding it. If you aren't properly filtering the information that's being ingested, making sure that it's factual and unbiased, then bad things are gonna start to happen. If I put in a bunch of misinformation, the responses I get back are just gonna be wrong. And that makes sense, right? The computer doesn't know any better. It only knows what we tell it. But things can actually get a lot worse than that. What if I put in a bunch of hateful opinions or biases? Well, that's exactly what you're gonna get back. You're gonna get a dark reflection of that data. And we saw that exact situation play out live in real time over on Twitch last year. Back in December of 2022, one of the big trends was an AI-generated show called Nothing Forever. This show was designed to parody the old comedy series Seinfeld, with its dialogue and assets all being generated by AI in real time. ChatGPT for the scripts, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, a few others. And I gotta say, it was impressive. Not only was this thing a pretty darn accurate replica of the classic series, but it was also just cool to see how all these systems could work together to make something entirely brand new. But then one day, GPT-3 experienced outages, prompting the creators to switch over to a different AI chat system, one that was less filtered, one that was less sophisticated with its ingested data. All of a sudden, the jokes the AI was making in the show became harmful and abusive. Characters started using slurs and making hateful jokes, and the show got suspended from Twitch. Bad data equals bad results. But then, how does this all apply to FNAF? Well, each new Tales of the Pizzaplex book has leaned more and more into AI. In the Mimic, we watch as Edwin, a close parallel to Henry from the games, makes an AI program to help entertain his son while he's away at work. In the Storyteller, we watch as that same AI system gets installed and starts controlling the entirety of the Pizzaplex. In the Epilogues, we watch as an AI program takes its ingested data too seriously, ripping the arms and legs off of people, wrongly assuming them to be robots. Bad data again yielding bad results. And the newest story, The Monty Within, makes all of this crystal clear when a boy named Cain gives a presentation about the human brain. He proposes that the left hemisphere of the brain is essentially like a computer, an AI within every person. That AI is then responsible for all the negative self-talk and flaws that human beings have. Quote from the story: "My point is that AI can only use what it's given. When the AI has bad data, it can turn into something that's harmful to itself and to the systems around it." The actual theory that this guy's spouting is a little bit out there in terms of realism, but the fact that he specifically calls it the AI within, it's no coincidence. The new villain of FNAF is rogue AI, unpoliced and then unleashed, with us humans helplessly trying to pick up the pieces too late and getting ripped to shreds in the process. But obviously all that's just happening in the books. Nothing like this actually exists in the games, otherwise we'd be aware of it, right? Right? It has been there and it's been under our noses the entire time. If you take this knowledge of AI from the books and start to take a look back through the games, you can see Scott sowing the seeds for these ideas as far back as Help Wanted. In fact, I actually called this very plot twist 4 years ago.
Then again, to call this character William would be missing a huge chunk of this game's story. This isn't William. It's no longer the same guy. He's now an AI replicating the behaviors of William.
To truly unpack what I'm talking about here, we have to actually rewind all the way back to FNAF VR and the origins of Glitchtrap. It's hard to remember this now, but when the happy waving bunny virus first filled our screens, there was a lot of confusion about what exactly he was. Was this the spirit of Afton manifesting within the code, or was he just a digital copy of Afton? We're told in the game that...
I mean, they sent us that stuff in the first place with no...
He's on the run! Cool as a cucumber! Beautiful wall pass! Brilliant! Stop next to defender!
Inasistencia.
Lowe's knows what a great assist can lead to.
Explanation told us to scan it. It was just junk, circuit boards and things like that. Looked pretty old. Somehow though, there was usable code on some of it.
He's Afton, scanned into the system off of circuit boards, but how exactly? Afton is and was always still a human. Why would his essence be on a circuit board? Back then, possession was the order of the day. Remnant, spirits infused into animatronic parts, and so for a long time we just collectively settled on the idea that Afton had somehow managed to escape his purgatory of Ultimate Custom Night by attaching a piece of his soul to a circuit board that was buried in the spring-lock suit that he was wearing. That circuit board then got scanned during the events of FNAF VR and AR, creating Glitchtrap, a virus that would then spread throughout Fazbear's systems, eventually passing into Vanessa. The series moved on, and we all moved on with it. But I would be lying if I said that this was the cleanest solution out there. The solution implied that Fazbear Entertainment went to the burned-down FNAF 6 pizzeria, found the spring-lock suit with Afton's dead body still inside, and then just, took out the circuit board to use. Somehow I'm not convinced that the workers would have been happy to continue their job when they pry open a suit and discover the remains of the company's founder inside. And yet, that was just the best that we had, because up to that point, that was largely the rules of the series. It was about the supernatural, not the sci-fi. It was possessions and ghosts, not rogue AI and technology on the fritz. Or at least, we didn't think the series was about that yet. But we were wrong. In FNAF World, take a look at the world map for me. It's messy, right? This thing is just so odd. It's hacked together with no transition between the lands. It's complicated with all these twisting pathways that have no
not gonna play.
to them. And then also, just on a basic level, why is it so zoomed out like this? Say what you will about Scott Cawthon's game programming, but he should know enough to make a better, more usable map than this thing, right? Well, that's because it's not a map. It's a diagram. It's a blueprint. A blueprint of
he
the
left. Everyone
human
left, I'm
brain.
pretty
I
sure.
know that sounds absolutely insane, but just take a look at this
You know,
map.
I realized
Take a look.
you guys can't see chat. My bad.
Look at this map of the human brain. Notice all the parallels here. A long brainstem right here in the middle where Pinwheel Funhouse is, Deep Metal Mine and Black Tomb Yard. Two smaller rounded areas in the back matching the cerebellum and the occipital lobe. Two smaller rounded lobes in the back of the brain. Even the twisting nature of the game's various pathways act exactly like the brain. Our brain is full of wrinkles, the gyri or curves, and the sulci or grooves. It's built that way so we have as much surface area in there as possible, which allows for more neuronal connections to happen, thereby making us smarter. And that's exactly what we're seeing here in this FNAF world map. That's also why it stays zoomed out the entire time, so we can see the silhouette. We can understand what Scott was actually going for. That white blob in front, it's either an eyeball or the frontal lobe. This, I suspect, was Afton's earliest experimentation with AI, with turning a robot brain into something truly intelligent, to try and put things back together like he promised his dying son. Back then, we weren't looking for clues to humanoid robots, but now, going back to the series and looking forward, we see those hints everywhere. Fast forward to Sister Location, there it is again. Afton literally has human heads sitting there on the desk, blinking, hidden in plain sight right in the lobby.
I gotta go back and get the one ending.
He was experimenting with creating artificial intelligence. Either he or Henry, maybe even both of them, created an AI program to speed up the programming process, to learn the way that a human learns, to copy and bring new life to their dead children. But by observing Afton, by copying him, the program was basically able to act as a second brain. Inputting bad data got them bad results Hiatus, and we wound up with Glitchtrap. There's also another related possibility here. In the books, the genius inventor Edwin, parallel to the game timeline's Henry, creates the mimic program to entertain a small child, giving it a rudimentary body so it can play and learn from the small boy. Eventually, his child dies, and Edwin abandons everything in his grief, including this mimic program. Fazbear Entertainment rolls in to collect what was their property, and in doing so, collects the mimic, but not before it kills a number of their employees. In true Fazbear fashion, that doesn't really stop them. Instead, they collect the parts, repurpose them, including the circuit boards, in order to create, quote, new scenarios for VR, AR, and arcade games, which is exactly what we see happening throughout FNAF VR and AR. Old circuit boards of the original games made by a rogue indie developer getting scanned into the system, child murder and all. And from that data, the system spits out Glitchtrap. Bad data, again, yielded bad results. The mimic basically got itself a crash course.
Did they have circuit boards like that in the 1980s?
In Afton. The
because
AI
that's how they've been like keeping them. There's no way.
Actions, leading to it manifesting as a man in a rabbit suit. Either way, whether the mimic program was built by Henry or William, an AI trained itself up to be Afton incarnate. And speaking of training, it's time for all of us to start training so we can change the course of history. Theorizing about the battle between good and evil in fictional worlds is fun and all, but have you ever thought about those what-if scenarios happening in real-world battles? What if the Romans had never conquered Egypt? What if Britain hadn't conquered, like, literally everyone? Well, I suppose not everyone.
We're better.
Regardless, thanks to today's sponsor, Rise of Kingdoms, you can concoct your own all-star matchups of history. Rise of Kingdoms has 14 historical civilizations that you can play as, like the Ottoman Empire, the Vikings, as well as
There is nothing like a Wendy's Frosty. It's cool. It's creamy. It's only $1 right now. Wait, what? The one and only...
Stop it.
Wendy's. Boy, Bird showing up during one of the endings of Security Breach was one of the weirdest and most frustrating things to ever happen in this franchise. We all collectively rolled our eyes and uttered his catchphrase, "I always come back," thinking, yeah, but did you really have to? It just raised more questions than it answered, like, how are you still alive? Was Henry wrong about Remnant being destroyed at high temperatures? Did Afton manage to escape the fire? It was nearly impossible to say. We had a...
Okay. So well, no, because that was a different ending.
Few ideas.
That was a different theory he made where Michael was the spring trap and he was lighting the places on fire to free all the spirits.
That involved Vanessa repurposing Glamrock Bonnie's endoskeleton, but now I think we actually know the truth. And again, that truth is rooted in this AI concept. Probably the best and scariest part of Security Breach was the utility tunnels, a bunch of narrow passageways full of endoskeletons that only attack when you're looking at them. But throughout this area, there's also a lot of posters on the wall. Weird posters, all meant to teach the Glamrock endoskeletons how to behave, how to correctly hold a child's hand, how to play nicely with other kids, how to not scare a girl in a bed that has a bedspread and lamp of the FNAF 4 house. Hold on, that's not just any bed either, it's a hospital bed. Oh, that feels like it has huge implications for the lore of FNAF 4. Anyway, that is not my focus right now. The point is, the endoskeletons down there in the basement, they're being trained up. They're being taught. They're being educated one by one. Data is being ingested by their systems. My suspicion is that whoever's doing the training down there, they're trying to find the right mix of data, the right combination of inputs to get the desired output. But what would that desired output be? Afton. You see, these robots have clearly been tampered with. If you keep looking, you see one poster where the robot is being taught not to knock over the cake. But then the X has been crossed off and replaced with a purple check mark. Yes, we do want that bad behavior. When you see a hurt child, don't help them. But as one last reveal for this section of the game, in the big final room, we see an endoskeleton wearing purple bunny ears and another purple rabbit behind him. That right there is Vanny, messing around with the new mimic line of Glamrock endoskeletons. It literally reveals her plan to turn one of them into the new Afton. She's finding the inputs that are required to create an army of evil Afton bots. She's looking for the data that produces her bad results. And that, ultimately, is what Burntrap is. The body of Afton with the mind of a mimic. The epilogues of the new book series take place in the FNAF 6 location under the Pizzaplex as it's being built. A new shipment of animatronics arrive, but one of these is unlike the others, looking burnt and mangled. Since they can't put this burned one up on stage with all the other new animatronics, one of the workers decides to program it to tear the heads and arms off of the junk endoskeletons that are just lying around. This obviously goes horrifically wrong though when the little robo decides to take his programming a bit too seriously. He starts ripping the heads and arms off of anything that looks humanoid, including construction workers and later a group of teens who sneak their way in the facility. We learn... Because,
you know, run down place with animatronics seems like the greatest place to sneak into.
Alongside the teens that this thing is also running a version of the Mimic program, and that it likes to wear costumes. It's also physically able to contort itself into any animatronic costume or shell that it needs to, expanding and contracting to fit any space or shape that it needs, even if that space is a human body. Quote, in a nanosecond, one of the Mimic's spidery legs reached out and peeled open the back of the blue dog costume. The instant the costume was breached, the Mimic wormed its way past the edges of the matted blue fur. Shockingly, the Mimic shoved itself inside the costume with Kelly. Lucia heard a sickening crunch. So, hold on a minute. A Mimic in the ruins of the FNAF 6 pizzeria that likes wearing old costumes, even if there's already a human body inside, that right there, that is Burn Trap. That's why we see what are essentially new glam rock animatronic parts entwined with the old fleshy parts of Afton. It's not that Vanessa rebuilt the body and just decided that they'd make for good decoration. The Mimic is literally contorting itself to fit in with what remains of Afton inside of his existing suit. So, feed an AI program a bunch of data about a serial killer and boom, you get yourself a serial killer. But feed an AI too much data, or data that conflicts, things start to get messy in a hurry. Enter Tiger Rock. In the books, AI is represented by two main creatures. One is obviously the Mimic that's roaming around in the basement like we just talked about, but the other is another version of the Mimic program, Tiger Rock, an AI that's in charge of the Pizzaplex. A tiger that, very specifically, has mismatched blue and green eyes. A very literal way of showcasing the two clashing forces that are operating inside of it. But what exactly are those conflicting forces? The book never makes it clear. In our last theory, I spoke a lot about how Edwin and his son David are stand-ins for characters from the game timeline. One of the creators of Fazbear Entertainment, Henry, and his young daughter, Charlie. In the book, the Mimic was built to copy David, and so presumably in the game, if the Mimic's there, it would also be designed to potentially copy Charlie, who was sadly killed by William and goes on to possess the puppet. And wouldn't you know it, just like the David AI taking control of the Pizzaplex in the book, that's why we're seeing puppet imagery weirdly spaced throughout the game, in puppet-colored wires, weirdly placed plushies, painted staff bots. It's an AI that's taken over the operation of the Pizzaplex, infusing itself into the very wires of the building. That's why both the books and the game have conversations written in weird, mysterious, shape-based lettering. It shows us that the Mimic program, Edwin's son, the entity controlling the Pizzaplex, the puppet, Charlie, and Henry are all connected. But while I am absolutely convinced that Charlie exists in the wires of the Pizzaplex, one thing that I haven't been able to answer yet is why all the imagery is evil. We're not seeing plushies of the marionette, we're seeing plushies of the nightmare puppet all over the Pizzaplex, the scary, evil version of the character. Why though? This character is not evil. If anything, this character is pure good. Is it because suddenly the puppet's vindictive? It's mad about being killed? Maybe it's angry that it's been summoned again to have to protect another generation of kids. No, I don't think so. In my last theory, I suspected that it had to do with Afton being mixed in with the puppet program. So you have these two competing codes, these two competing forces having to share one space, one body, for lack of a better word. And I think that I was really close on that one, but still not quite right. Think about it. Tiger Rock is very clearly meant to have a green eye and a blue eye. Green and blue. Charlie and Elizabeth, the puppet and baby. The protection of the puppet mixed with the violence and anger of Elizabeth. Throughout the books, Tiger Rock is depicted as having a duality about him. He's good and loving and fun, but then suddenly he turns sinister and threatening. There's this moment in one of his stories where he literally helps a kid like, quote, a puppet on a string. Doesn't get much more explicit than that. And yet later that same story, he just rolls up and rips the kid's arms clean off. No joke, that is how the story ends. It is very bizarre and dark. Do I have a lot of evidence to suggest that Elizabeth might be mixed in there? Yeah, I'd say I have like a medium amount. Outside of Baby's iconic blue eyes, we also have ourselves years of book canon establishing that Elizabeth and Charlie are often revealed to share the same body, most explicitly with the Fourth Closet novel. We also have this weird moment in the main Tiger Rock story where he takes the form of a white clock face. This moment comes out of nowhere and is unlike anything else in the story, but where have we seen that sort of thing before? Sister Location and the white baby-faced clock. Let's just call it a theorist hunch. I suspect that that is why both the puppet and baby are deactivated when we see their masks in the blob. Their actual AI code, their spirits, whatever you want to call them, they're off elsewhere. They're in a separate AI entity, the wires of the building. But speaking of the blob, the AI theory also solves that one too. So Daddy AI is down in the basement, and the AI trained on the two warring daughters is fighting for control up in the Pizzaplex itself. What about the blob then? Well, the blob is just everything else. It's the mixed data. It's the AI when you feed it too much information. When you open the entirety of the internet to ChatGPT, a confusing mess of wires and information and a lot of angry people. As Glamrock Freddy says,
let's not do this.
are here.
Take a look at this description for the mimic from one of the book's epilogues. Quote, creeping out the back of the overalls-clad mushroom was an abomination of twisted and contorted metal. A mass of metal joints with wires, with one of its eyes on one leg and the other on its back. One of the legs extended from where its mouth should have been. Unlike the mimic's footfalls when it was upright, this configuration of the mimic's parts made a tisk-tisk sound. A sloppy ticking that was at the same time squelching wet and dryly brittle. End quote. There is only one creature that's still around in the series that matches that description. The blob. That's right, I'm telling you that I think the blob, this confusing, weirdly designed mess that we found in the basement of the security breach, is actually one final version of the mimic. Just listen to the sounds that it makes. Its appearance and the sounds that it make match how it's described in the book almost word for word. A twisted body that's able to grow and shrink, slither into suits, expand and contract, a mass of twisted and contorted metal parts, wet yet dry sounding movement. It is absolutely him. There's even some in-game evidence to suggest that this is more than just speculation. The Fazwatch tells us that a huge amount of power goes down to the basement. We all thought that it was meant to keep Burntrap's body alive. But what if instead it's to keep the blob alive? In the books, whenever the mimic appears, the lights tend to flicker and go out as it draws power from anything around it. That also means the ending then, where the blob scoops up Afton, it's just him ingesting more data. The Afton data. It's all the data coming together, getting mixed up, getting more complicated inside that Freddy spaghetti. It's a mimic sweep. And as I discussed in the previous theory, it's also why I suspect that Gregory is not who he says he is in the Ruin trailer. It's the mimic still. An AI now trained by watching Gregory's behavior throughout Security Breach, hearing Gregory's voice talking to Freddy. Bit by bit, this AI is absorbing everything around it, learning from it, assimilating it. And we'll see how that ultimately plays out in Ruin. Or, you know, maybe I'm completely wrong. So with that theory out of the way, what are you guys doing now? The game is out today. Literally today as this one's uploaded. I'm sure you're all probably scrambling to get through it as quickly as possible to see whether I got anything right. Literally anything right. I'm actually doing the exact same thing right now over on GT Live. Tom and I are probably playing through the game as we speak. So please keep an eye out on GT Live for all those uploads coming. Then, right? This is one of the big debates that's captured the attention of the fan base. If the Princess Quest ending is correct, then it kind of has to be the same Freddy. It would be very highly coincidental if not. So how then do you explain all these new features? Well, first, I think it's important to call out that design updates between games, it is nothing new for this franchise. Probably the best known example of this is the evolution of Springtrap in FNAF.
I'm so excited because he's not talked about this once. In the amount of episodes, in like the 90 episodes he's talked about, he's not talking about how they changed once.
FNAF 3 to Scrap Trap in FNAF 6. William Afton's basic anatomy, it is nothing alike, despite it being the same dead body in the same rotten suit. Even in this game, Candy Cadet, complete overhaul between his first appearance and now. Or just take a look at any of the other animatronics. Their endos are real different to the ones at the end of Security Breach, and yet each and every one of them has suffered the exact same damage that they did in the previous game. But one detail that can't be replicated is something that I think a lot of the community has started to overlook. Something that can't be denied, and it all relates back to the Vanny mask. We're told that this mask is known as the Virtual Augmented Neural Network Integration Unit, or VANI. As the name implies, it allows us to use augmented reality to physically see and access the neural network, that's just a fancy name for AI, controlling the Pizzaplex. Throughout the game, we use this ability to make fences disappear, access security nodes, and teleport from location to location. That much is obvious. What's less obvious, though, are how the various endoskeletons behave while we're wearing the mask. As we pass most normal endoskeletons in the game, we see them wrapped in swirling pink code. This shows that they're connected to the network. They're being powered by the AI system in charge of the Pizzaplex. Now, when Cassie has the Vanny mask off, they'll start chasing us. That's because we're suddenly visible to them. We're just a kid. We're a target. But notice what happens as soon as we put the mask on. They stop chasing us. Instead, they go back to what they were doing before. We've disappeared from them because we're integrated into the AI system. We're no longer a kid. We've become one with the code. It's actually pretty brilliant, subtle storytelling. But now let's get back to the topic at hand, our headless Freddy in Ruin. Unlike every other animatronic, when we put on the mask around Freddy, not only does he stop chasing us, he outright disappears. We can't see him anymore. And likewise, he can no longer see us. Why? What makes him so different? What is this trying to tell us? Well, if the Vanny mask jacks us into the Pizzaplex's AI system, his disappearance tells us that he's not a part of that system. He is not swirling in pink code because he's removed from the Pizzaplex's network. How'd that happen? Well, we saw it at the top of Security Breach. Freddy glitches out and has to be rebooted rebooted in safe mode. That's why he's friendly to Gregory in a way that none of the other animatronics are. He's no longer under the control of the AI network controlling the Pizzaplex. In a sense, you could say he's thinking for himself. And we see this continue throughout the entirety of Security Breach. Whenever Gregory sees Vanny running around, Freddy states that he didn't see anything.
You didn't see the dancing rabbit lady right in front of us?
No, I did not. There is no rabbit at the Mega Pizzaplex. Not anymore.
Vanny is very clearly real, but she's wearing her mask, thereby making her invisible to the one robot that isn't a part of the wider AI system, that only changes when Freddy is equipped with Roxy's eyes. Roxy's eyes in that game were a part of the AI system, which is why that upgrade suddenly allows Freddy to see things that were formerly invisible to him. He's seeing everything that's a part of the AI network, and that includes Vanny.
Vanny, I can see you now. I have new eyes.
This one detail is why I feel that Ruined Freddy here has to be the same as our best boy from Security Breach. This is a Freddy that has been removed from the system, one that was rebooted in safe mode, taking him offline, something that almost guarantees that he has to be connected to the Freddy from the original game. Weird Freddy curveballs aside though, this game makes it abundantly clear that I was right on the money with my last few theories about how AI is now the major focus of the series, and specifically AI programs that have been corrupted by Glitchtrap, Afton's old evil data, hence why everything is wrapped in this purple or pink code. Well, everything except for Roxy. Instead of being made out of purple code like the rest of the animatronics, she instead has sections of her body made up of green code, specifically around her face, her arm, and her foot, making her look a lot like she did at the beginning of Security Breach. It's strange, right? But it actually ties into our previous theories. This neural network controlling the Pizzaplex isn't just influenced by Afton. According to the books, the AI program was originally built to play with Charlie, a girl that wore a green wristband in order for the security puppet to protect her. That's why we see Tiger Rock, the book's manifestation of this same AI, with two colored eyes. It has evil and good data inside of it, and different animatronics are tapped into different amounts of that same code. That's why Roxy is surrounded by green code that makes her look like she was originally supposed to. Green is the color of protection, of safety. Her influence is now putting green markers over the parts of the system that are good. This duality is actually best exemplified by, believe it or not, the daycare attendant, Sun and Moon, or Eclipse, as they're known when fused together. Since the beginning of Security Breach, this thing's presence in the game has always felt very random. Like, why is he here? Just to be another scary thing to chase us around? Maybe, but that doesn't tend to be how these games work. And why would they choose such a random design of being both light and darkness, sun and moon? Well, now we know. In one of Ruin's many lore-heavy Easter eggs, if you go up to him with the mask on while there's only one generator left to activate, you'll hear a new line that states,
No! It's not safe yet! Turn on the other generator!
Clearly, Eclipse is conflicted. One half wants to protect you, but it's getting shut away by the darker, more sinister half. He is good and evil combined. He represents both codes competing within the same body. Other animatronics are more of a sliding spectrum. Some are more corrupt than others, but Eclipse represents the balance that naturally exists within this neural network system, which leads us then to the ending of the game. Whether Gregory is actually the one trying to kill Cassie in the final moments is a theory for another day. Instead, I'd rather focus on this, the Mimic Tunnels. At the end of the game, we're chased by an endoskeleton known as the Mimic, a robot that's able to learn from and copy other creatures. But even before we get to the elevator, Gregory tells us his friend, presumably Vanessa, has these plans for the underground tunnels.
My friend has access to the building map. Just follow the instructions.
But what are the tunnels? Why are they here? Who put them here? These tunnels aren't just random. Someone has been down here before. They've installed lighting and an elevator and everything. We also know it wasn't Gregory and Vanessa because they're on the opposite side of the room that the Mimic was locked in, the Pizzaplex side, complete with the mixes system. We also know that these tunnels weren't just part of the FNAF 6 location because the game makes it a point to show that we're a number of floors far below that building. It tells us that this location has to be older than the FNAF 6 pizzeria. So again, I ask, what are these tunnels for and why are they here? Well, the clues to finding that answer are hidden in the Mimic's room. Normally, you wouldn't be able to see any of this stuff. You break down the wall, you enter a cutscene, and the Mimic starts to chase you. However, at this point, Steel Wool understands that the internet gonna do what the internet gonna do. We're gonna rip into the files, we're gonna free cam our way all across these maps, and we're gonna crank up the brightness hunting for clues. And sure enough, there is a lot that's hidden just out of sight. Inside the Mimic's room are two costumes, a grandma bird and an elephant clown. There also seems like there's supposed to be a third costume, a lion wearing a varsity jacket, but that one I was only only able to find in the game files. That said, in one of the game's secret endings, the Mimic wears a costume that's kind of a mix of all three of these things, so that's the evidence that we need there. And overall, it's a pretty interesting find. We know from the books that the Mimic is a fan of wearing costumes. In the Mimic story, as well as the Pizzaplex epilogues, we know that the Mimic mainly cycles between two costumes, a mushroom and a jester. In the story, Edwin, our parallel for the game's Henry, was responsible for turning those costumes into animatronics for Fazbear. And that right there, that's an important detail. You see, the books make it clear that those costumes came from a time before Edwin made Chica into the first animatronic. In other words, these off-branded characters like a jester and a mushroom predate practically everything else that we see in the games. They come from a time before the core lineup of characters was officially decided. When Edwin disappears after the death of his son, Fazbear Entertainment goes to his abandoned home and reclaims all of their property. The Mimic, the costumes, everything. Think this is only specific to the books? It's not. I suspect that we've been hearing about these costumes ever since Night 4 of FNAF 3.
Do you think BB is a Mimic? This is a jester costume.
Very short notice, so questions about appropriateness/relevance should be deflected.
But that's not all. On your way down to the FNAF 6 location, we find ourselves in a massive cave system full of bioluminescent mushrooms and waterfalls. This immediately felt weird to me. I mean, it is the first time that we've ever been in a place like this, a place that is outside of a building location in this franchise. So why now? Why this particular setting? Why such a beautiful cave with such specific details? It's odd because we've never seen anything like this in the entire series. Well, almost never. In the second novel, The Twisted Ones. As a friendly reminder, that's the one where the main character gets vored by an animatronic in the end. Good memories had by all. When Charlie awakens from being trapped inside one of the twisted animatronics, she finds herself inside of an old Freddy Fazbear pizzeria. As she explores, she too discovers a cave system with, wait for it, glowing mushrooms and a waterfall. What does it mean? Well, the more I looked into it, the more I realized the strong parallels between Ruin and the original novel trilogy. In both cases, we follow a young girl who's looking for a boy the same age as her that goes missing. She finds an old pizzeria buried below a mall, and when she goes down there to where she believes the boy's calling from, it's revealed to be a trap. Am I saying Cassie is Charlie? No, I might one day, but for now I'm still mulling that one over. But I do think that there are clear connections between this game and those books that are directly being called to our attention. And what's the primary location for the final book in the series? The location where this story finally comes to its ultimate conclusion? Circus Baby's Pizza World. Look again at the costumes that we see in the Mimic's room. An elephant, clown, and a lion. Both animals that are commonly associated with circuses. The grandma bird actually looks a lot like a crow to me with its wide yellow beak and its dark blue coloring, which again reminds me of the Disney film Dumbo, another circus-based film that stars crows and an elephant attraction. The elephant is even wearing a clown outfit, for crying out loud. It is practically screaming at us that these costumes were designed to be mascots for circus babies. It's why when they were brought into Fazbear's as backup costumes like Phone Guy said, their relevance was questioned, because Fazbear never had a circus theme or revealed any of these sorts of characters. They were Williams from a long time before. But that's not all. Throughout Ruin, there are secret plush baby rooms where the dolls troll you, and a whole suite of plush baby AR collectibles that specifically call out how weird it is that these things are here. This is Fazbear, not circus babies. There is no reason to call out all of these parallels unless it is specifically to call our attention to Circus Baby. These locations are connected somehow, but the final nail in the coffin for me comes thanks to one of the secret endings in the game. After the Mimic chases you in costume, you end up in a locked room where you hit a big ol' red button and a claw-like machine comes down from the ceiling, grabs the Mimic, and defeats it, at least for now. And what's that ending called in the game files? The scooper ending. This thing right here, it is a scoop. And where's the only other place that we've ever seen a scoop used? Circus Babies, an underground bunker that you can only access via an elevator. Oh wait, that describes exactly where we are. Now, remind me again what game is coming out later this year? One that has a trailer starting in the sister location elevator? One where we see a very familiar security panel from Ruin down in the bottom right corner. Help Wanted 2, the second VR game. The Mimic has been around much longer than any of us suspected, and we're gonna find out more about him in the next VR installment coming this winter. This has all sorts of implications. For one, the parallels between the Mimic and Ennard are undeniable. An animatronic that's an amalgamation of a bunch of other animatronics. What makes this one even more interesting is that the books just confirmed all games up through FNAF 6 as being games in universe of the Pizzaplex. So was Ennard just a fictional version of the Mimic the whole time? Again, that's a theory for another day. But more importantly, this actually has some some massive timeline implications as well. Part of the reason it always felt tough for me to place Circus Babies into a timeline is because it closes after the death of Elizabeth. That always felt like a good starting point for Afton to then begin seeking eternal life and to put people back together. But what didn't make sense is why Baby would have a claw mechanism in her chest to capture kids. Afton wouldn't need to capture kids until after he had lost his child. But if Circus Babies was actually much earlier in the timeline, like these old costumes seem to suggest, things start to fall into place. Henry was the initial robotics genius. Afton just had the ideas and then gave them to Henry to turn into animatronics, like what we see with Edwin in the Mimic stories. I always brush this little detail off as confusing, but before the release of Sister Location, we got this ending from FNAF World, where Henry sits at a desk talking about the evil that he created before he unalives himself, just like what we see him do in the novel trilogy. At that point, we see a pair of glowing eyes and Baby's voice calls out,
"Everyone, please stay in your seats."
This all implied that Henry was the creator of Baby, not William, despite Afton's name being the one on the copyright. But now I think we have an answer that solves all of this. William went back to collect his costumes after Henry's disappearance, just like what we see happen in the books. When he does this, he also finds the Mimic program, deciding to use its programming and technology for his own creations. The Funtime animatronics, who can do what? They have the ability to mimic voices. We see Baby doing the exact same thing in Sister Location when she mimics the voice of Elizabeth to try and lure Michael to his death. I suspected in my last theory that Baby was still at play here. That's why Tiger Rock's eyes are blue and green, Elizabeth and Charlie. And given everything that we just talked about today, I have no doubt that this is still very much the case. How it's gonna play out though, we'll have to see in FNAF VR 2 later this year. Obviously, there's gonna be more to cover here in the coming weeks, specifically about Gregory, Cassie, and Cassie's dad, but more on that one next time, because in the meantime, remember that our brand new line of merch just dropped today. Need to carry your books or laptop to school? Well, the
next one.
I was gonna buy some gym shorts that cost me $60 each, but after hearing about this $10 shorts deal...
Shut up.
A portion of today's episode is sponsored by Delta Force. Let's talk about Eclipse, Sun and Moon, daycare attendant. Whatever you call him, I have one question for you. Why is he here? He was randomly introduced in Security Breach, and sure, he managed to deliver one of the hardest, scariest parts of that game, but really ask yourself, what or who is this thing? In a series that doesn't do coincidences, one already full of a core band of animatronics with old and new faces, as well as deep cut returns like the Music Man, why introduce a completely random character completely disconnected from everything else? Honestly, I wasn't sure, and I didn't really talk about him in my theories for Security Breach, but it definitely bugged me in the back of my mind. And now, here he is again in Ruin, and not only is he back, he's got more collectibles than literally any other character. 4 masks, 2 piñatas, 2 plushies, and 2 golden plushies, which is especially strange when main characters like Roxy and Chica only have like 1 or 2 items tops. What is the deal with this thing? Well, give him a nice close-up look. And now, watch the clip of the Mimic from the end of the game. You see anything interesting? It's the teeth. The teeth are the same, each one individually attached and able to articulate itself. Eclipse, in some way, is related to the Mimic. And knowing how old the Mimic is, step aside there, Chica. Eclipse was the first. He has truly seen everything.
Yo, this whole thing is so confusing. Because he just like keeps...
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, a show that has valid theories, no eggs required.
My theory is the valid theory. Matt Pat can suck an egg!
This one's for you, Mark.
Last time, we started digging deep into the ruins of Security Breach's DLC, where we started to chip away at this game's mountain of mysteries. In the process, we were able to come to a few solid conclusions. First, that Princess Quest was the canon ending, meaning Vanessa was ultimately freed from the control of Glitchtrap, and everyone celebrated the victory by eating oddly symbolic ice creams on a hill. That also meant that this headless Freddy with the word prototype on his foot, it was indeed Gregory's Freddy. But perhaps the biggest twist of all was that underneath the rubble, underneath the Pizzaplex in FNAF 6 hid the one and only Circus Baby's Pizza World. This revelation was huge. Not only did it suggest that Circus Babies has been around since some of the earliest days of the franchise, but I think it also reveals what the true purpose of Ruin is. This game isn't about looking at the future of the franchise, instead, it's all about the past. I believe that Ruin is trying to tie up the loose ends from parts of the franchise we left forgotten. That way, we can move forward with later games. And so today, we're gonna be diving into that past, because that history is gonna be the key key to understanding mixes, Sun and Moon, the truth behind Glamrock Bonnie, and even our new protagonist, Cassie. So hold on to your nearest handrail, theorists. This elevator is taking a one-way trip straight to the first floor. Or should I say we're taking a trip straight to the first lore? I could say that, but I probably shouldn't. That's a really terrible joke. Anyway, let's start off by talking about our new protagonist, Cassie. Even though we spend a whole game with her, we ultimately don't learn all that much about her. Basically, we learn two things. She's a fan of Roxy, and she's got some real bad luck with vents.
This vent is creaky. I really hope it's... Look, no more vents. Every single time I get in one, it breaks or something jumps out at me.
We also know that no one showed up for her birthday party.
Have you booked your party? I'm sure your friends will show up this time.
Well, no one except for Gregory, which is why she's so determined to save him. It's kind of cute. But aside from that, there's not a whole lot else about her. In fact, in an odd twist, we actually learn more about her dad than we do about her.
A fast wrench. It's just like my dad's.
And it's not just in random throwaway lines either. Thanks to the AR collectibles found throughout the game, we get a ton of information about Cassie's father. That her dad used to collect old Freddy and Friends lunchboxes. That Bonnie was his favorite character. That he refused to tell Cassie why Bonnie got replaced. And notice how every line describing him is written in the past tense, implicitly telling us that her dad is no longer around. There is a lot in here. It would be fine if she just offhandedly mentioned her dad once, but the fact that Steel Wool has put multiple references in here means that this character has to be important in some way. But how? And more importantly, why? Well, for Cassie to say that her Faz wrench is just like her dad's makes it pretty darn obvious that he not only worked for Fazbear Entertainment, but he was also a technician. Throughout the years, we've encountered a handful of technicians, mostly in the books. They're usually adjusting rides, fixing animatronics, nothing too exciting. However, there is one set of technicians that has gone long forgotten in the game series. That's right, way back in Sister Location, we got to see actual humans in this series, only for them to quickly get Sayori'd out of the picture. Heck, we even got to hear these guys.
Just seems like these things can't go a day without breaking down.
Now, I'm not saying that Cassie's dad is one of the two men that we hear talking or see hanging, but the ending's connections to Sister Location, plus the trailer for Help Wanted 2 featuring the Sister Location elevator and an electric panel like the ones that we see throughout Ruin, it all leads me to believe that her father was one of these sorts of technicians, one of the technicians that worked as a part of Circus Baby's entertainment and rentals. In fact, I suspect that he's the one we'll be playing as in that new game, Help Wanted 2, coming out later this year. As the trailer says,
"Welcome back for another week of career fulfillment and minimal social interaction."
Clearly, this is someone who's been down here before, and the facility in the game is working and operational. Notice the lack of yellow danger tape found at the bottom of the elevator shaft. We're gonna be joining him for a few days on the job, which in turn should give us the backstory for the events that we're seeing play out during the ending of Ruin. Maybe even witnessing the moment that they had to seal up the mimic. In fact, I'll take it one step further. Now, this one is a long shot, but I suspect that he and Cassie might wind up united down there in the bunker at the end of all of this. You see, even though Cassie speaking about her father in the past tense implies that he's dead, I don't think that that's actually the case. I think he just went missing. Look at these two item descriptions. The first is for the AR Bonnie mask, which reads, "What happened to you?" You might interpret that to be, "What happened to you, Glamrock Bonnie?" But that's not true. First, this is an AR mask of the original Bonnie. It's a mask first seen in Help Wanted 1 as part of the Trick or Treat minigame. It actually far predates the Pizzaplex. But secondly, and more importantly, Cassie actually knows the truth about what happened to Glamrock Bonnie. She knows that it was Monty Gator who eliminated him from the picture. In a later item description, this time for the AR Glam Monty plush, the description reads, "It's hard to look at. Why? Why would the only Monty item that Cassie can collect in the entire game be so hard to look at?" Well, it's because she knows what he did. She knows that Monty's guilty, violent, responsible for trashing Glamrock Bonnie. And as a result, Cassie has a hard time looking at him the same way again. So wait, if the line "What happened to you" isn't about Glamrock Bonnie, then who is it about? Well, it's about her dad. He disappeared one day and they don't know where or why. That's why she refers to him in the past tense. But that then leads us to another question. Why is she reminded of him with that particular item, the Bonnie mask? Just because Bonnie was his favorite? No. I suspect it's because her father wore that Bonnie mask. And not only did he wear it, he wore it during the single most infamous scene in the entire franchise, the Bite of 83.
Was that the Bite of 87?
No, Mark, no, it wasn't. My theories are the only valid theories.
yet.
go lick a
I don't have
stick.
enough
I'm saying that Cassie's
stuff
dad is the Bonnie bro.
to do that.
Now, that at first might seem like a stretch,
Not
but again,
enough.
remember what prompts
Yeah.
the memory of her father. An old mask of the original Bonnie. Just like Bonnie bro wore on that fateful day all those years ago. What's more, notice what's missing from all these collectibles. You have a Bonnie mask and a Foxy mask, but no Freddy, no Chica mask. It's suspicious, right? Like, why? Why would Steel Wool include such a random and, more importantly, incomplete collection of memorabilia? It's clearly them trying to tell us something, that this mask is connected to the Foxy mask, the one that Michael wore during the bite of '83. What's more, Cassie's dad is clearly established to be a massive fan of the Freddy's franchise. One of the collectibles in Ruin are these cute little Freddy and Friends lunchboxes that we're told he used to collect. Now, Freddy and Friends was a cartoon series created by Steel Wool to help promote the release of Security Breach a couple years ago. It was animated in the style of old Hanna-Barbera cartoons, similar to things like Scooby-Doo, Yogi Bear, the Flintstones, all shows that actually started in the late 60s but remained popular throughout the 70s and the 80s. Dates that very nicely line up with Fredbear's Family Diner being open. And that's not all the proof we have here. Notice how these lunchboxes have a classic metal design with a metal handle on top? They're very similar to designs that we saw popular for kids' lunchboxes that existed between the 50s and the 80s. But here's the thing, we don't even need to go as far as masks and lunchboxes and cartoons. Pull up Cassie, pull up Bonnie, bro. Can you guess where I'm going with this? Can you? If only there were a way that I could just, I don't know, just visualize the design similarities between these two characters. Oh, I know. Hey, editors, do you reckon you could whip up something for me? Maybe something that connects the red shirt, blue shorts, brown hair, maybe the darker skin tone of these two characters? Yes! Beautiful. It's like a work of art. Pièce de résistance. I mean, really, what more proof do you need of this one? But that then brings us back to the question of why. Why pick Bonnie Bro of all people? Just for the Easter egg? Random reference to a past character? I don't think that's it. For 9 years now, FNAF has been the story of one family, the Aftons. This was their tale, their lives, their mistakes, their deaths, their resurrections, all of it culminating in that FNAF 6 fire. But with the introduction of characters like Bonnie Bro as Cassie's father, we're being told that we need to widen our scope, not just focus on the Aftons, but rather to those around them. I still believe FNAF 1 through 6 is the Afton story, but this new era of FNAF, it's about how the actions of the Aftons during their story affected the people around them. The ripple effects, the collateral
I just
damage.
put it in the
Bonnie
description.
Bro was just a kid who grew up loving Bonnie, loved
you
watching the show
may
made by his
possibly have
best
to
friend's
leave stream
dad.
and come
When
back
that
in
friend
to
Michael
show up.
Afton roped him into a prank that went horribly wrong, he never lived it down. He went on to study robotics and become a technician so that it would never happen again. And Ruin just keeps on digging up the past, because now I want to talk about arguably the most confusing character across the entire franchise, Eclipse. But first, I need to tell you about something else that has a long history. Today's sponsor, Delta Force. This game goes way back, and I do mean way back. It originally released back in 14 years after its last installment in 2009, Delta Force is back with a brand new cross-platform operator-based tactical shooter, Delta Force Hawk Ops, which available on PC and mobile, but there's a console version on the way, which means that it doesn't matter what you and your friends are playing on, you can experience a game that has truly persevered across the decades. Once again, make sure you click the link down in the description below to pre-register for the game. Thanks again to Delta Force for sponsoring this part of the video, and now it's time to talk about the perseverance of someone else, a character from FNAF this time, the daycare attendant. In general, Sun and Moon, they just don't work. They're a court jester, which makes sense inside of a castle-themed daycare, but not in the whole 80s-tastic, futuristic pizzaplex. So where did this thing come from? Well, underneath this terrifying mask is a set of robotic teeth, and those aren't just any teeth, they're made to move independently. Now that might not seem like that important of a design feature, but believe me, it is. There's only one other character with teeth like that, and it's the Mimic. Now take another look at Eclipse's design. It's a scrawny design with arms and torso that are basically just long metal rods with springs wrapped around them. And when you take a look at the back of the head, you'll see a circuit board just there, out in the open. The design feels simple, rudimentary, very bare bones, just like the Mimic, who's made up of old parts from industrial machines. Two animatronics made from the same basic shapes and parts. Now, am I saying that Eclipse is a Mimic? No, but what I am saying is that these animatronics seem to come from the same time period.
Yeah, they're not the same though, because look at their hands.
Time period that predates practically everything that we've seen in this franchise. How early are we talking about here? Well, for the answer, again, I turn your...
How do we keep going farther and farther back?
attention to the AR collectibles. Well, playing through the game, I just couldn't shake how random the collection was. I've talked about this before. A Foxy and Bonnie mask partnered with a Sun and Moon mask. Where's Freddy and Chica? A similar thing happens with the golden plushies. You got Sun Moon, Foxy, Bonnie, Baby, and Glamrock Freddy. It's a weird assortment, but again, there's no Chica. Or you got the pinatas. There's just 3 of them. Sun Moon and Bonnie. Not labeled Glamrock Bonnie, just Bonnie. It's almost like the game is trying to tell us something with all these random groupings and which animatronics are present where. And I suspect that what we're actually seeing here are the eras of the franchise and the key players that existed in each one. And the one who came first, Sun and Moon. You'll notice that of all the collectibles, there are 2 that are visibly unique relative to all the others. A collection of 2 masks that stand out from the rest. The comedy mask and the tragedy mask. They have no eye or mouth holes. They're not even colored. And the fact that they're labeled comedy and tragedy and not Sun and Moon tells us that these weren't just any masks, they were old theater masks. You're probably familiar with these things, the laughing and crying masks. Well, you see, the tradition of theater masks actually originates in ancient Greek theater. The first plays evolved from rituals that involved masks, so it was natural for actors to wear masks that represented these heightened emotions that their characters were feeling. And while I don't think that Sun and Moon date back nearly that far, I do suspect that these masks were actually Afton's first creations. For years, we've been left to speculate about the time that came before Fredbear's Family Diner. And I did my best in the Ultimate Timeline to piece together a plausible narrative for what would bring Afton to create Fazbear based on the evidence that we had available. But I think that these AR collectibles are Steel Wool's way of telling us that journey. Look at the evolution that's present here. Comedy and tragedy masks. They're the first. They're part of some theater or vaudeville-style sideshow. Then you go to Sun, Moon, and Bonnie pinatas. A third new character gets added into the mix. Afton's character, the Bunny. Then there are 4 masks. Still Sun and Moon, then Bonnie, and then Foxy. There's no Freddy or Chica because they're not here yet. They didn't join the band, as it were, until William and Henry started working together. It's then, and only then, when Henry brings his barnyard animals to the table, Chica, Pig Patch, Happy Frog, that we see the Lunchbox crew develop. The core 4 that we've known and loved since FNAF 1. And then the AR plushies are just everyone who's currently relevant inside of the Pizzaplex, i.e. every character that's been created. As for the golden plushies, I'm not quite sure what they're meant to be. That one remains to be seen. Regardless, that progression of character development would explain why Afton's solo adventure after the closure of Freddy's was circus themed. He's had himself a jester and jester adjacent characters for years. Though, I would like to point out very strongly that a jester and circuses are not one and the same thing. A clown is not a jester, and a jester is not a clown who works in a circus. A jester is someone who entertains royalty, a king and a queen. He does not work under a big top coming out of a small car. And
that's why they
on the fact that everyone's teasing this new game carnival themed, which again, carnivals are not circuses and circuses are not jesters. You're all just trying to retroactively fit them into these themes where they don't technically go, which honestly probably tells you more about the lore than you would expect. It's actually kind of smart world building. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked there. Anyway, we know thanks to the Tales from the Pizzaplex that a jester costume was present all the way back when the original Mimic was made. Quote, Dominic's flashlight glow picked out a brown Freddy Fazbear costume, a yellow Chica costume, a Foxy costume, a Bonnie costume, and a couple bright pink and yellow-green court jester costumes. And it's clear that the jester idea persisted throughout all of Afton's plans, because in the epilogues of the Tales from the Pizzaplex book, we also read this. Quote again, as soon as Lucia's hand slipped into the jester costume sleeve, she recoiled and snatched her hand back. What is it? Kelly asked. It's okay. I just almost got into a spring-lock suit is all. The jester costume developed from just a normal costume into a spring-lock suit. Suits, which were definitely used in Circus Baby's Pizza World.
Try not to wiggle, though. You're inside something that came from my old pizzeria. I don't think it was ever used. I'd recommend that you keep the spring locks wound up.
The spring lock suit in the epilogue also has a mask that matches up almost perfectly with our daycare attendant. One final quote. Lucia stepped up to the costume, suppressing a shiver at the jester's leering, toothy grin and its wide eyes. And the best part is, thanks to the Mimic, I think I can pinpoint exactly when Circus Babies started and eventually fell through. I decided to look a little deeper into the room just before the Mimic chase. It's an old room filled with shattered security nodes, propane tanks, and the Mixus hub, all connected to a computer which we can use to free the Mimic. Now, the majority of people have been assuming that Mixes is Gregory's doing. His backpack is down there after all, and the Mimic has his walkie-talkie, but something just didn't add up to me. The computer controlling the Mixes server is way older than any of the other technology that we see throughout the Pizzaplex. We've got camera galleries, modern office spaces, even portable security camera viewing stations, but this super important system for keeping the killer robot under lock and key is using only an old CRT monitor? Yeah, no, that doesn't doesn't feel right to me. And this computer isn't just any computer, its design matches those from the 1980s. Specifically, it reminds me of the IBM PCJR, computers that were released in, get this, 1984. Mixes has been around for a long time.
Yeah,
trying to keep the mimic locked away, but why? Well, I think I have an answer to that. An answer that also gives us an explanation for why Mixes shows itself as a blue rabbit. See, I don't think Afton only copied physical characteristics from the mimic to make animatronics like Eclipse. I think he also took its software to speed up his creation process. I think that this was one of the ways he was able to populate Circus Baby's pizza world with the Funtime animatronics. As John from the channel FNAF has been quick to point out time and time again, almost all of the Funtimes have themselves a very specific function. They have the ability to mimic voices. Just like John, I too believe that Afton got that functionality from the mimic program itself. After the tragic death of his son during the bite of 1983, Afton needed a backup plan, something that he could build fast, just in case the Fazbear name was permanently tarnished. So he went back to the mimic program and made a copy of its software, transferring it into his newest creations, hoping that they would be able to learn routines much faster. He could then give them stomach hatches and other features to help him capture kids, all to forward his experiments in bringing his son back to life. Everything looked like it was going according to plan, but sadly, we know what happened. His daughter got too close to one of his traps.
Daughter got yoinked.
Afton was obviously devastated by this and shut the whole thing down. The mimic program had failed spectacularly. He sealed up the old location with concrete, and as a safety measure, he created a new program that would keep the mimic locked away permanently. A system wrapped in his signature purple, guarded by the one creature that he could trust, the rabbit Bonnie. And so Mixes was born. That then gives us two separate mimics, one inside Baby and the Funtimes, ready to be collected by Fazbear Entertainment and used to create VR experiences, and the other still trapped down in the basement. This would actually go a long way to explain a weird moment from the middle of Ruin, where Helpy and the mimic argue with one another.
What happened to it?
They're both mimic AI, so what exactly is going on here? Well, it's two versions of the same program finally in the same place after so long. Helpy is the mimic program in the network, while the mimic talking to Cassie is the physical mimic down in the basement. It's possible, it's confusing, and I suspect it might just be right. Guess all in a day's work for FNAF lore, am I right? But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Alright, so now it is changing. This next one is a film theory, not a game theory. See how this, let's see what this is.
I got Botox Cosmetic. There was a particular
So I'm kind of excited.
The lines.
Thanks to Google Meet for sponsoring a portion of today's video.
Hello, Bonnie. Take his face off.
Long have I waited. Finally, it's my turn.
That wasn't scary.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to Film Theory, the show that always knew that this day was coming. It's been over 8 years, but finally, the Five Nights at Freddy's live-action feature film is set to hit the silver screen in a little over a month. And you know what that means. It means that nowhere is safe anymore from FNAF theories. Don't believe me? There's a FNAF cookbook releasing in October. A FNAF cookbook. It's coming for you next, Food Theory. And all we need is a FNAF fashion line that's infected all of us. Oh my sweet stars, what have I done? But for as satisfying as it is for Film Theory to take another toy out of the toy box of Game Theory and claim it as our own, see also Sonic, Mario, and Last of Us in this year alone, in all seriousness, we are way overdue for a theory breaking down our predictions for this movie. And believe me, there is plenty to talk about. If you're on YouTube and you somehow missed the phenomenon that is Five Nights at Freddy's, how? Like genuinely, how?
Sneeze.
I need to know your secrets. This series exploded about a decade ago, with every Let's Player on the platform screaming their heads off over the haunted animatronics hunting us down in the ruins of a dilapidated pizzeria. So while the scares certainly got us started, it's the story that's kept us going. What's helped the series persist for as long as it has been its incredibly mysterious story told through scraps of information and obscure environmental details. Heck, 60 episodes later on Game Theory, we are still trying to decode this thing. Really? It's only been 60? Feels like there gotta be 100 at this point. And this new FNAF movie,
He's talking about only 60. I'm at 93.
We stand true to the franchise's roots, not in terms of the lore necessarily, but in terms of the cryptic storytelling. There is a ton of information packed into the few short minutes of trailer footage that we've seen so far. Enough that I believe we can predict the entire plot of this new movie, right down to the shocking twist ending that's gonna leave you devastated. Here's a hint. If you think this movie has itself a happy ending with everyone smiling and living happily ever after, then clearly you have not been paying attention. So today, film theory does what game theory's never been able to do. Solve this franchise. And we're gonna do it before the movie even releases. Keep your eyes on your monitors, loyal theorists. We're going in. So I think a good place to start with our prediction here is sort of laying out what we think the movie's trying to do with FNAF as a franchise. Just from watching these trailers, I think it's clear that this movie does not take place in the universe of the games. Why? This thing. I have played, watched, and read every last scrap of information this franchise has put out, and this is unlike anything we've ever seen before. Clearly, it's a murder weapon, and clearly it was made by the franchise's big bad, but why, what, and how is still a complete mystery. My best guess, and again, this one's a guess, is that it's a remnant extractor, a way to ensure murder victims have the most traumatic, awful death possible, so the agony they experience can be harvested to help create creatures with eternal life. If none of that meant anything to you, strap in, El Chippo. You're in for a crash course. By the end of this thing, you're gonna be talking about Fazgoo with the confidence of a pro. Looking at the trailers and IMDb, we know that this is gonna be the story of Mike Schmidt, the security guard from FNAF 1, but things are different this time around. Well, this certainly appears to take place in the 1990s like the original FNAF game, considering everyone's using old school wired telephones, there are no modern cars, and all the monitors are old CRTs. They're also bringing in characters who clearly reference later parts of the franchise, specifically Vanessa from Security Breach, a blonde security guard in the game who here appears as a blonde police officer. What I think's going on here from a meta perspective is that the movie's taken a bunch of stories from the game franchise and simplifying them for a general film audience, while trying to keep the most iconic aspects of the games intact. Plus, they're gonna be combining ideas and characters from different eras of the franchise to get as many recognizable aspects of FNAF into one film as possible.
Yeah,
that's why we see the story from the original FNAF interacting with someone new from Security Breach. And then you have a girl named Abby mixed in there whose name is literally an anagram of baby, all fighting against an unbroken version of Springtrap. That right there, that is the filmmakers trying to bridge the gap between the different eras of FNAF and bring in as many fans as they can. The OGs from 2014, the new fans from Security Breach, and also your average Joes who can't tell a Fred Bear from a Ned Bear, let alone a glam rock from a rock star. Oh, you have so much to learn. So all in all, think of this movie as something that's gonna wipe the slate clean and start fresh, referencing moments and key characters from the games and books, but not being beholden to them, because, you know, that's not a confusing route to go at all. That said, let's just hope they don't stray too far from the games. Case in point, this detail right here. During a spoopy, scary moment in the trailer, Nebraska is spelled out very clearly on a poster in very large, very bold letters right next to the main character's head. This was an intentional decision definitely put into the trailers to keep us talking. This means something. Now, the general consensus is that the FNAF games normally take place
There's a Colorado location, Nebraska.
Utah. Multiple spin-off book series have made that detail quite clear. Could it be then that they've moved the setting to Nebraska for some reason? Maybe, but I don't think so. It'd be weird to just have a state poster of the state that you're currently in right above your security desk. My guess is that this poster was put here intentionally by Mike. It's important to him for some reason. My best guess is that it's #goals, an aspirational place to go to help him get out of his current situation. Because on the face of it, things don't seem to be going all that great for him. It looks to me like Mike and his family have fallen on some hard times. First off, we don't see his parents in these trailers at all. Though Mike's father has been cast, I'm gonna guess that he's only here for a flashback scene, considering he doesn't look too much older than Mike's actor Josh Hutcherson. Additionally, we see that Mike and his little sister Abby are living in a small house with an average car, and Mike is looking for any job that he can get.
I was just calling to see if that job that you offered was still available. I will take anything.
We later see Mike bring in Abby along with him while he's working, implying that this is probably their only option. They can't afford a babysitter, and if there were parents at home to take care of Abby, why would he be bringing her to his night shift job? So Nebraska might be a symbolic place of freedom for Mike, a place to escape and finally be free. More or less, though, I believe that the setup for the backstory of the FNAF movie is gonna align with that of the first game. Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria was a popular arcade and food chain represented by its 4 iconic mascots:
Foxy, Bonnie, Chica, and Freddy.
However, they're not the only ones here. Seems that some of the children encountered another animatronic, a large yellow bunny rabbit that's separate from the other 4, as we see in a drawing here on the wall from this shot. This was a costume used by the owner of the establishment, William Afton, an outfit that he would use to get closer to the kids, which honestly is creepier in a movie than it was in the games. You know, just your typical yellow bunny friend holding hands with 5 kids, which, when you're talking in horror movie speak, is code for he killed those kids, stuffed them into suits, and eventually turned them into haunted robots. Also, just just to call it out here, I originally thought that there was gonna be something hidden in this wall of drawings beyond just the obvious. I mean, it is the perfect spot to sneak in little bits of hidden lore, but the more that we've seen of the wall in other trailers, there doesn't actually seem to be that much of anything here, sadly, and honestly surprisingly considering the franchise we're talking about. Speaking of Yellow Bunnymen, the trailers seem determined to convince us that the person we expected to play the franchise's big bad isn't actually playing the villain. Despite rumors that he would be playing our resident Urple murder man William Afton, in the trailers, Lillard's character is clearly labeled.
You said purple or Urple?
But the person we expected to play the franchise's big bad isn't actually playing the villain. Despite rumors that he would be playing our resident Urple murder man William.
He said he said Urple. He didn't say purple, he said Urple.
Afton, in the trailers, Lillard's character is clearly labeled as Steve Raglan, career counselor. But here's the rub. If there's one thing we've learned here on film theory over the past decade, it's that trailers can be manipulated to create mystery or confuse timelines. See also Morbius and Infinity War,
exactly
just to name two key examples. And here, I think we're being presented with the exact same sort of misdirect. In fact, I'm almost 100% confident that I can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. First, Matthew Lillard confirmed that he signed a 3-picture deal to star in more than one FNAF movie. And unless Steve Raglan's a new character that Blumhouse is just really hype about, I expect that deal was to play Afton. However, far more convincingly, we have this scene from the trailer where a young boy is seen getting kidnapped in the middle of the woods. Based on the film's official website, the synopsis reads that Mike is still, quote, haunted by the unsolved disappearance of his younger brother more than a decade before. And we know, based on casting, that the brother's name is Garrett. Now, the actor playing this kid Garrett is named Lucas Grant. Hopping over to Instagram, Grant commented on a post by Matthew Lillard saying that it was great to work with him and that he's much nicer than his character. Now tell me, why would a young actor playing a kidnapped boy have any reason to interact with a career counselor? He wouldn't. The only way they interact is if Matthew Lillard, Steve Raglan, William Afton, call him whatever you want, was kidnapping that kid. In other words, in this movie, a big final reveal will be that Matthew Lillard kidnapped Mike's brother. This would actually parallel some key moments from the original novel, where William Afton acts under a pseudonym, Dave Miller, and has the perfectly normal mundane job of security guard for an old abandoned mall, a job that allows him to supervise the comings and goings around Freddy's. That way, when kids start poking around, he's able to hop into the suit, get it, hop, because he's a rabbit, hop into the suit and try to scare him away, just like we see him doing here. And lastly, in the novels, he also kidnaps a kid prior to becoming a crazed serial killer. Honestly, a lot of the details here line up. Now, before we start jumping from video to keep tabs on Freddy and the gang with more plot predictions, let's take a moment to thank a service that I bet Mike wishes he had. Our sponsor for this portion of today's video, Google Meet. Gotta be honest with you guys, when Google reached out to us wanting to partner to talk about their video calling app, Google Meet, I was definitely surprised. Weird theories about spooky movies? Yeah, not exactly the first thing that pops into my head when I hear the words a video calling app, but hey, the more I thought about it, the more it actually makes a lot of sense. See, we've been using Google Meet for all of our Team Theorist meetings for years now. Basically, the entire time we've been a business. We're mostly a remote company, and Google Meet is the tool that allows that to happen. It is quite literally a daily part of my life, with no less than 3 hours a day being spent on Google Meet. It also checks out because Meet slots into so many other services that we use every day with zero extra effort on our end. Google Docs, Calendar, out to the pizzeria to figure out what exactly is going on in Five Nights at Freddy's. So really, when we look at a lot of the clues coming from these trailers, the story is largely what you'd expect. There's a string of children disappearing from the pizzeria, resulting in Freddy Fazbear's shutting down. Judging from both the kids drawing on the wall and this shot from the trailer, looks like Afton killed 5 children, as we'd expect from the lore of the first game. Our favorite bunny-themed serial killer hid the bodies of the kids inside the animatronic suits, and in so doing, trapped their souls inside the robots forever. And we know that they're sticking with that specific part of the lore based on the jump scare here. It is so good every time I see it. Children's hands popping out of animatronic mouths. Not only is it terrifying, it tells us that he definitely hid the bodies inside there. But now recently, people have been poking around the old abandoned pizzeria. As we see in the most recent trailer, some small-time criminals break in, intent on robbing the place and trashing it up for fun. I believe that that sequence is probably going to be the beginning of the film. These characters breaking in before they're met with a terrible fate. The possessed animatronics come to life and kill them as they're mid-crime, not only showing the audience early on that these things are terrifying, but also creating a giant problem for Afton, who now risks having more people poking around his old murder den. Hoping to prevent future break-ins and deeply uncomfortable questions about his past, Afton decides to hire a security guard to keep an eye on the place during the night. His first option doesn't exactly work out all that well, but not to be deterred, our plucky mass murderer tries and tries again to find someone who'll keep the building safe. Enter our main character of the movie, Mike Schmidt. Mike will do anything for cash. Based on these two shots from the first trailer here, we know that Mike has a history of working as a security security guard, but likely he got carried away in a previous role, resulting in him getting fired. Desperate for cash and with no one willing to hire him, Mike takes a job as the night shift security guard at Freddy Fazbear's, bringing his sister Abby with him. Seems like things aren't too strange starting off. Though it's certainly creepy, they explore the pizzeria without much of an issue, until of course there's a knock at the front door. Mike goes out and meets Vanessa, a police officer with a strange interest in the building. In fact, she seems to know a lot about Freddy's.
In the 80s, kids went missing. The police searched Freddy's top to bottom. They never found them. That's why the place shut down.
Looks like somebody watched our complete timeline. Soon, as creepy occurrences start happening all across the pizzeria, Mike realizes what he's gotten himself into.
There are ghost children possessing giant robots. Heads up.
And here's where the stakes get higher. Obviously, the animatronics.
I'm still watching the stream on my phone. So if anyone comments in chat,
isn't going to be the only thing on the line during this movie. Throughout the trailers, we see shots of Abby going off to explore the pizzeria alone and ultimately hiding from Foxy in the ball pit. Let's just hope that she doesn't time travel. In all seriousness, though, somehow Abby will befriend the animatronics, especially the leader, Golden Fredbear, a character that you'll notice never appears anywhere except for in shots with her. Why does she befriend them? Or rather, why do the animatronics choose to befriend Abby? Well,
what do they want?
They want to make her like them.
Yep, the animatronics want to add another member to their ranks, and that is going to be the big driving factor for this movie. Mike and Vanessa are going to rush to try to solve the mystery of the kids' disappearance and put their spirits to rest, hopefully with plenty of time to save Abby. The scenes where we see Mike interacting with the kids outside the pizzeria, I believe that this is where Mike is trying to put the pieces together and is speaking to the spirits in something like his dreams. Of course, William Afton does not want this to happen and has to get himself physically involved, disguising himself in his old Springtrap costume and chasing Mike and Vanessa around in an attempt to silence them in the big scary action set pieces. Afton will likely capture and injure Vanessa at some point, considering that we see a yellow rabbit hand grabbing Vanessa's neck here and Mike sitting by Vanessa in the hospital looking concerned. So that's the main setup for what I see happening in the movie, but what about the big twist? There's always got to be some sort of a big twist in FNAF. Well, I believe that it comes with the identity of some of the spirits. You see, we actually get a pretty good idea of which spirits possess which animatronic bodies from this shot in the trailers. It's pretty obviously telegraphed. Bunny ear kid is Bonnie, redhead with pirate claw is Foxy, the girl wearing all yellow is Chica, and the boy with the top hat is Freddy. As for the last kid though, well, the obvious thought was that he was going to become the mysterious Golden Freddy. I think that's what I and everyone else assumed when we saw that first trailer. But now, I'm not so sure.
Activating beast mode. 3, 2, 1, go. Let's go. Beast mode. Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's go. Beast mode. Ready, set, go. Blowing up, yeah, we breaking the chains. Playing with fire, don't rattle the cage. Pushing the limit, whatever it takes. This is the moment where legends are made. Let's go.
Making it done. It is a golden affair.
Let's go. Beast mode. 3, 2, 1, go.
The fact that this fifth child in the shot doesn't have a characteristic explicitly linking him to an animatronic has to be intentional, and I believe that it was the filmmakers keeping things ambiguous so he wouldn't guess their twist. I suspect that the fifth kid here isn't Golden Freddy. Instead, I think it might be the Cupcake. Yeah, I know, I get it. It sounds ridiculous, but hear me out on this one. In the latest trailer, we clearly see Cupcake moving around independently and attacking someone without Chica's help. My initial gut thought to this? Well, that's kind of stupid, to be honest. Like, does Chica's soul transfer down into the Cupcake alone for remote attacks, leaving Chica soulless for a while now? Or can a spirit divide itself and act on different parts of the character at different times? You know what? I'm not sure. I don't have a good answer for it, but I do think that this would open up an incredibly dark and compelling twist on Golden Freddy. Remember, these 5 kids who disappeared at Freddy Fazbear's in the shot aren't the only kids that have gone missing in this story. We still have ourselves Mike's missing brother Garrett, who we talked about earlier as the kid in the back of the car, likely being carted away by old Billy Afton up in front. I mean, in this franchise, it would be shocking if someone kidnapping a child wasn't William Afton. Anyway, why do I think that this is actually the moment that we see Mike's brother get kidnapped? Well, again, we turn to actor Lucas Grant and Instagram, where we see this post of him hanging out with another child actor named Wyatt Parker. Parker even calls Grant his best bro, an interesting choice of words considering that Parker was cast in the film as young Mike. 2 twin brothers, one who gets kidnapped. Almost a one-for-one replica of what we see happen in the Silver Eyes novel. So let me ask you, what if Mike's brother is Golden Freddy, separate from the tragedy at the pizzeria? We can assume that Mike's brother was kidnapped in one of the earlier parts of the timeline, a time when Golden Freddy would still be in use. And in the games, we've long theorized that Mike Schmidt is in fact Mike Afton, son of William Afton. This would also mean that his little brother was the crying child who was killed and became one of the spirits that possessed Golden Freddy. Given the fact that Mike's father's been cast and is distinctly not being played by Matthew Lillard, I don't think that's the exact direction that they're taking for the movie, but taking the core of that story, keeping Mike's brother as Golden Freddy, well, that would fit with both the timeline and serve as a devastating twist to the casual audience. It would also explain why Abby is spending so much time with Golden Freddy in the trailer. It's her spending time with a brother that she never got to know, whether she realizes it or not. It could also explain why Golden Freddy retains blue eyes when all the other animatronics have red ones. The circumstances of his possession are just a little bit different. He's interacting with the family. So Afton attacks Mike and Vanessa for getting too close to his secrets, and despite fighting back, they ultimately lose. As they're about to die, Abby is able to win over the animatronics and use them to fight back against Afton, saving them all. You'll notice one of the oddities of the trailer is the design of Springtrap. It is different from what we see in the games. It's cleaner and it's more put together. It has not gone through all the rotten decay that we'd expect from this character. I believe that's exactly how it ends. Mike, Abby, Vanessa, and the animatronics defeat Afton by trapping him in the walls. Tying a bow on the end of this movie while still leaving him in a position to turn into the decayed, rotten corpse that we all know and love for the eventual sequel. However, all things can't end happily here. I believe there's a good chance that the animatronics are gonna wind up getting what they want out of Abby in the end. Her name is an anagram of baby, after all, an animatronic that first appeared in FNAF's sister location. The team celebrates the defeat of Afton, only for Abby to accidentally stumble into a clown outfit, or maybe get put there by a vengeful Golden Freddy, giving us our villain and the problem to solve in the eventual second movie, saving the girl from her eternal, ceaseless torment. Or maybe that ceaseless torment is just meant for me, who is now tasked with trying to solve the timeline of this franchise across multiple channels. Truly, the animatronics have taken another victim. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut.
No mom ever looks at that beautiful baby laying in her arms and thinks mental illness. Jason did not have a lot of symptoms that we could point to before he received his diagnosis. He had told us about some bizarre things that he thought were taking place in his life.
I thought you make eye contact.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, where today we're going to be doing what we do on a lot of these days, talking about FNAF, but we'll mix up today. We're doing it on the couch. And let me tell you, I got a theory for you. It is a theory that you are absolutely guaranteed.
You got purple one on. You got purple one on.
The hate. Get your pitchforks ready, my friends. I am prepared to get dragged all across Twitter and Reddit for this one, but then again, honestly, that's kind of to be expected at this point, because that's largely been the response to a lot of our FNAF theories lately. Any theory that I release at this point starts with this massive wave of comments like, Matt's theorizing has gone downhill at this point. His latest FNAF theories are lazy, proper research is not being done. He's clearly running out of material. I'm genuinely wondering if he's even passionate about this franchise anymore. There is a difference between telling theories and straight up telling misinformation. Harsh, right? In fact, I don't know if you've noticed this, but pretty much every script that we do at this point, especially about this franchise, always comes packaged with some sort of predetermined disclaimer right at the top. Cue the clip.
Fair warning, though, the conclusions we've reached that solve security breach, they are controversial. I feel good about them. Like, I think that we've locked in on a lot of the answers here, but they're gonna raise a lot of discussion. Let's just say that you're either gonna love that episode or hate it. I don't really think there's gonna be much in between on that one.
And while we'll certainly get to my problems here in a minute, let me just say, I seem to be in good company. It's not just me getting these sorts of responses. A lot of FNAF theorists are receiving the same sort of constructive criticism online. John from the channel FNAF, he has regularly told that, quote, his recent theories are horrible. Yes, I went to a printer and actually printed that out so I could read it. John lied about the contents of the most recent story. And, here's another one, I don't want to be rude, but the mimic and baby theory sucks. I don't want to be rude, huh? Well, you might want to look up the definition of what it means to be rude there, friendo. And it's not just me and John either. Rytoast, another FNAF theorist, also involved with this one. He was told that his theories massively whiff. I mean, honestly, the list could go on and on here. The feedback is endless, but the TLDR of all of this is that I went down the line of FNAF theorists and I just kept seeing the same thing over and over again. It's not just my theories that are getting all this hate, it's all theories. And that's weird. So I figured that we should probably do a theory about that because I think I know why this is happening. And honestly, just like the FNAF lore, it's pretty darn complicated. But at this rate, if we don't actually stop to take the time and address it, I worry that it could actually end up harming this community and the whole FNAF franchise as a whole. First off, I think it's important that we set some context here. Every FNAF theory that we release at this point is met with the internet largely dismissing it as insane or jumping the animatronic Felix the Shark, such as, Cassie Dad is Bonnie Bro. It is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, says one commenter. Great. I mean, I also said that Deadpool is Ernest Hemingway. I'd say that one was dumber, but sure, go for it. Maybe you missed that one. Daycare attendant's endoskeleton teeth match the mimic. This one right here says it is dumb, 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 dumb. Agree to disagree on that one. We'll get to that in a second. Oh, and this one here is a classic. Gregory's a robot. This theory is literal cancer. No, my friend. No, it's not. It is not a literal cancer. And if me suggesting that a fictional character in a YA murder bunny game is a robot is that bad to you, go touch grass. Anyway, you get the point. There is a varying degree here of these sorts of comments. But the main thing is that this is nothing new. When I suggested Dream Theory as the explanation for the first wave of games back in 2015, people were so mad. They hated it, because honestly, I was dismissing 4 games of story and beloved characters with the whole, oh, it was all just a dream trope. Honestly, I didn't love it either, but it felt like where the evidence was largely pointing at the time. And yet, it's only now, all these years later, that the sentiment has finally changed on that theory, and people largely agree that Dream Theory was right at the time, and that Scott just pivoted the story later with Sister Location. Or at least it was right until then this new Tales of the Pizzaplex book is coming out, and apparently it rewrites FNAF 4 into some hallucinogenic gas creation. Thanks for that one, Scott. Couldn't even let me have that victory, could ya? What do you want from me, Scott? I'm selling the books for ya. Speaking of the books, by the way, it also happened with those books. I started using the books seven years ago. I've been reading these things for 7 years. This is my literary...
Scott keeps... Go to the screen. Well, that's a good quote from Matt Pat. But like, I think Scott keeps changing the lore of his own game.
7 years of this book. I could be reading like War and Peace
like,
or
all the time for some reason.
Tom's Cabin or something. But no, I get to read Tales from the Pizzaplex 1 Lally's game. Great. This is how I enrich myself. To my knowledge, I was one of the first, if not the first person, to seriously use the books for overall theorizing. Let me tell you, people hated it at the time. They despised it. They're like, why would you do that? Why would you talk about the books? But those theories actually helped me predict that William Afton was going to be the villain, that Charlie was going to be revealed to be the puppet, that Sister Location was buried under the Afton house, and that Michael Afton was the Foxy Bro. And that's just a few of the conclusions they helped me reach. And now, here we are, a whopping 7 years later. I've got a couple of gray hairs, and the pendulum has swung completely in the other direction. Now, the community holds me and all the other FNAF theorists hostage if we're not looking at the books, or if we're looking at them improperly, and not treating them as 100% canon to the events of the game. Long story short, time is a powerful thing, and in this franchise especially, it is super powerful, considering that Scott repeatedly has said that he uses both the games and books in the future to clarify the events of the past. Or, you know, that's just his shorthand way of saying that he uses those future things to just ultimately pick the direction that he wanted to go the entire time. The long and short of it is that sometimes the craziest theories in the moment become the correct.
Your time has come.
Theories a year, or 2 years, or even 5 years down the line as more details solidify around the story. For a great example of this, let's just take a look at everyone's favorite Gregory as a robot theory, where I propose that Gregory is indeed the robotic reincarnation of the crying child. When I look online, this is often the one that people point to as the point where Matt Pat fell off, where he literally lost the thread of the games, and to this day, it has entered the hallowed pantheon of theories that get memed to death, right alongside Luigi's eggplant height, weight, his girth, Luigi's girth. It's a girthy boy! And of course, the Lord of
This
all,
gets weird.
Sans' nest, the king that rules them all, right? And more often than not, that robot theory gets boiled down to this singular graphic right here. So much so that we actually started to meme on it ourselves. And you know, when it gets to us memeing something, it is definitely dead. We are so cringe that we make your dad's jokes look cool. But here's the thing, Gregory as a robot is now a theory that has spawned over 4 other theories and constitutes over 15,000 words.
Jesus.
And so dismiss it as purely white kid in striped shirt go brrr. Isn't that you just falling into the same trap that you, the internet accusers, have leveled at me? You say that I ignore evidence, that I don't do my research, that I ignore key details just to forward my intended narrative, but isn't that exactly what you're doing there? I mean, look at the facts, and for the sake of clarity and for the sake of your screenshots,
that's the whole thing, to do research.
Singular page, since I know that you all love to boil my theories down to one image. So how else, my friends, would you explain that Gregory looks like the crying child, that he is colored in purple, which connects him to the Afton family, that he's taken a bite out of a golden Freddy head ice cream cone just like the crying child got bit, that he's being called broken, which parallels the final line said to the crying child, his vision getting all staticky when Vanny skips past him in the Pizzaplex, and him looking differently when Freddy gets Roxy's eyes. I don't know about you, but that right there, that seems to me like a lot of important evidence. So who's really ignoring evidence to forward their intended narrative here? Me, the person trying to concoct a theory to explain all of those details, or anyone online who continues to insist that Gregory, you know, he's just a normal kid. And just like with dream theory and book theory, more evidence for this has just started to stack up. Since the release of Security Breach, the Tales from the Pizzaplex books, which many are now considering to be 100% canon to the games, these books have repeatedly included over and over again, story after story of kids either becoming robots, always being robots,
Matt Pat
or
retired,
being taken
so
over by
I don't know
robots.
if he's still making those
You
stuff.
don't even have to read
Like
the
if he's still in
stories
control
the
of
books to
those.
know this. I mean, just look at the theme of these covers, right? Robot humanoid kid, robot humanoid. This one doesn't count. Robot humanoid. Like
This
the
one doesn't
last
count.
book in the series that's coming out like right now as this episode releases, it is literally about a kid who turned himself into a robot. Yeah, look at it. It's got human fingers and everything.
What is that thing?
Another one of those stories, this time GGY, it focuses on a boy named Gregory, sounds familiar, who sets high scores in the Pizzaplex, again, should sound familiar. He disappears multiple school counselors, similar, and he goes by the name Dr. Rabbit. This story right here is basically shouting in our faces the fact that Gregory is patient 46, confirming that, regardless of how you feel about Gregory as a protagonist, he's a bad dude. He is killing people off, or at the very least, he's making them disappear to protect whatever secret he has. Something that, again, we predicted as part of that Robot Gregory series, and something that people at the time really didn't like. Plus, you can't ignore the fact that he's calling himself Dr. Rabbit, which again, is yet another connection over to the Afton family. And while it doesn't ever explicitly say that Gregory is a robot, it does write him with some very oddly robotic characteristics. Quote from here, Greg returned the wave. He smiled. Then he cocked his head and studied Tony for several seconds. It's weird, right? It's written in a very specific way. It's an odd detail that signaled my theorist senses, and honestly, it feels to me like he's written like an AI, stopping to learn, study human behavior, to grow and operate. And that sort of AI connection actually returns when we go back to Security Breach. Here, I'd like to direct your attention to the wall code from the secret sister location room found near the end of that game. Very quickly, the FNAF community figured out that this chunk of wall code right there read as follows: dodge, duck, flash, shoot, crawl, run, crush the vile band. Who is the only character to do all of those actions? It's Gregory.
So I don't know how they decoded those triangles on the wall.
He is literally crushing the band. So this room, an Afton room, mind you, is in some ways trying to speak to Gregory. But why would it be written in such a weird language? Well, honestly, we had no way of knowing it at the time. It wasn't until a year later, when this book finally came out again, this is the same one with GGY, but this time it had a tale called The Storyteller. This one is a tale all about a genius roboticist who speaks to his AI creations in a very specific way. Quote again from this book, every sheet of paper was covered with odd stick drawings and strange symbols that were not at all familiar to Mr. Burroughs. Squiggles, squares, loops, triangles within triangles. The code is the language of the Mimic. The Mimic being an AI program designed to copy those it watched. All signs point to Gregory being a robot built as part of this AI system. So throw that one over there onto that one-pager screen grab from earlier. Oh yeah, and don't forget the fact that we also discovered that Robot Kid heads were found down in the sister location bunker, showing that Afton was working on Robot Kid projects way sooner than any of us ever expected. That should actually be on there too. And overall, you look at that one screen grab, it's pretty crowded in there, right? And even if Gregory isn't a robot, it feels pretty darn clear that someone in this franchise probably is at this point. Here's the thing, I'm not bringing all this up to try and convince you, the internet critics out there of this theory. There are some dead horses that I just want to leave alone, believe it or not. And honestly, I don't care if you believe this theory or not. I do not care in the slightest. I have no horse in this race, though apparently I have a lot of horse analogies to make, which is weird. I am here having fun in my little corner of the internet, trying to solve silly video game mysteries with a cool team around me.
I flick my mouse on the screen to see the delay.
I would love
2
the
seconds,
internet critics to join us.
pretty
That would be
good.
awesome. We are an open-minded community. We are welcoming. We embrace you with open arms in the most fan-friendly way possible, but not in a way that's going to get us canceled. But for the people over
He was
Reddit
sounding
and
like he was
Twitter
wrapping
who
it up,
accuse
so
me
actually
and all the other
five,
theorists
so
of
he's
ignoring
not.
important
Let's wrap it
information
up.
for the sake of forwarding our own version of a narrative just because we don't care about this franchise, ask yourself honestly, who's really the closed-minded ones here?
Of course, we get an ad.
We're the ones pointing out
Get
this
that outta here.
information. We're the ones who are trying to solve what all this means. To ignore it, that actually feels disrespectful to the franchise. While we're being honest about all this, let's also be honest about our standards for clue hunting. I have been raked over the coals a lot across recent theories for making visual connections between characters and objects. My last theory, great example of this. I drew parallels between the daycare attendant and the mimic because both of them have very unique teeth, where each individual tooth is independently operated. It's a completely unique design for an endoskeleton, only shared by those two characters, and yet a lot of people were quick to dismiss the entire idea as just surface level. Oh, it's only a coincidence. But do you remember what franchise we're talking about here, friends? We started with counting animatronic toes and buttons. But the reason that I bring that up is that while many dismissed that specific connection, I saw those exact same conversations happening around the mimic's hand with its clawed fingers. Oh my gosh, clawed fingers, just like Glitchtrap or the Glamrock's hands. You do realize that you're doing the exact same thing that you were criticizing me for, right? I mean, if you're allowed to compare sharp, pointy hands, then I can compare independently moving teeth, right? In the end, well, things have certainly gotten more sophisticated in the theorizing space, and we have higher standards for our evidence, and we should always be looking for more evidence to support any of our conclusions. Simple observations, like fingers or teeth, they're easy ones to build off of. They're easy ones to start exploring.
Matt Pat was not taking the disrespect. That's what he's
really
not taking
awesome,
the disrespect.
We as humans are pre-programmed to seek closure in whatever we're doing. And it
He
makes
is
us feel
right. He is
secure and
right.
brings
But
a
he's
sense
not
of
taking the
satisfaction,
disrespect
closure,
of
right?
them
There's
talking all that
actually an entire
smack.
brand of psychology dedicated to this very fact. So naturally,
Oh
when we're
my
faced with
God.
a series that doesn't give us any sort of clean or definitive answers, it's easy for us to want to find the simplest solution or cling on to certain details like they're indisputable facts because it's better to be wrong than to be uncertain. And FNAF makes that hard because it's a story that's built on shifting sand. It went from souls possessing animatronics to liquid soul metal to digital consciousness transfer and then to goo that literally tries to steal your identity. And
Yeah,
while
which
that's
is
frustrating.
weird.
Honestly, it's also what makes the franchise so fun. Taking
Okay, so I really, I don't know if it is actual lore, but I hope it's not, which is the goo from the book, how it like takes your identity. That just doesn't make sense. That would be one thing if it was lore accurate. Then
possible answers.
that would
But
make
that
me a little mad.
extrapolation, honestly, I think is where we're rubbing people the wrong way. A few weeks ago, I asked a bunch of you online to take the Myers-Briggs personality test. Now, this is a really fun assessment that breaks you down into one of 16 different personality types based on letters. Are you an E, an extrovert who likes just being out with people? Or are you an I, introvert, who likes your quiet alone time? Are you a structured and organized J for judging? Or are you a go with the flow
You got a
for
fast
perceiving
boo.
P? Do you prefer logic
Keep
and
talking about the
thinking,
boo.
T? Or do you like to go with your gut and your feelings, F? But for this particular debate, I actually wanted to focus on two letters, S and N. Now, these two letters focus on how you process information. The S stands for sensing. This means that you take the information from the world around you and you take it at face value. You use your 5 senses to determine what is real and factual. It often means that you look at the world in a very literal way. N, on the other hand, stands for intuition. It's not the cleanest of lettering systems, but they'd already used the I. Anyway, if you're an N, it means that you interpret information in more abstract ways. Rather than just relying on exactly what's in front of you physically, you take that information and then you go a couple steps further. You make connections between things in interesting ways to go beyond just your 5 senses. So, how does this relate to theorizing? Well, the vast majority of this channel's subscribers are Ns. They're taking information not at face value, but building more abstract connections to find solutions. In fact, almost everyone who works at Team Theorist here is an N, purely by coincidence. It's not like you can actively screen for something like that. It just works out this way because the way we do things here requires a certain mindset. A mindset that only about 25% of the population is innately comfortable with. Is Mario a villain? No, of course not. There are so many examples of him being a hero, but you also can't ignore little details like the time he chained up Donkey Kong or the time that he stomped on his little brother's toe. And that right there yields some pretty interesting conclusions if you connect all those dots, leading to, hey, Mario is a villain. That's not to say that you can't also theorize as an S. You absolutely can. In fact, our creative director Tom and FNAF theorist John were both in town a couple months ago and they showcased this exact difference in mindset. They probably best showed it with how to interpret Michael's ending monologue from Sister Location. Tom's an N, John is an S. John used the literal words being said to inform his interpretation, while Tom was more focused on how the words were said to imply meaning.
Fun fact, by the way, after we shot this video, we got into contact with John, and we asked him to take this test again. And since he first visited, his Myers-Briggs has actually shifted to more of an N type. Remember, the Myers-Briggs test isn't just black and white, it's a spectrum. John was originally 59% S, but now that's shrunk down to 32%. That doesn't mean that he now has no more S tendencies, it's just that his exposure to the wonderful world of FNAF theorizing has led him to look at things differently, to link the obscure, to make connections from small details, and to imply meaning through more abstract means rather than the more literal ways that he might have done a couple years ago.
And that right there, that is the fundamental difference that's happening in the fan base right now. I think a lot of the newer fans to the franchise are S's.
And when you look at our survey results, you can actually see this playing out, with almost 25% of S's joining during either the FNAF VR, AR, or Security Breach era. Compare that to N's, where only 18% joined during that era.
And so when evidence needs to be interpreted with an N mentality, it's making them uncomfortable, or even outright mad. Take for instance this clip from our most recent episode.
But secondly, and more importantly, Cassie actually knows the truth about what happened to Glamrock Bonnie. She knows that it was Monty Gator who eliminated him from the picture.
A lot of people were quick to point out that on the description of the Glamrock Bonnie plush, it says, quote, "Dad wouldn't tell me why they replaced Bonnie." In fact, this was one of those moments where people outright accused me of lying about the evidence, saying that I was ignoring the text, that I was literally showing on the screen. That would be really dumb of me if that was what I was doing, but let's actually take a closer look at that specific line. Dad wouldn't tell me why they replaced Bonnie. Typically speaking, someone that's an S would look at that line and take it literally. Her dad wouldn't tell her what happened, therefore, she doesn't know what happened. However, as an N, I'm not just taking those words at face value, nor was I willfully ignoring them. I was just interpreting them differently.
This is Gaming. With our free Windows downloadable software, you'll have access to a gaming.
Dad wouldn't tell her what happened. That doesn't necessarily mean she doesn't know what happened. Your parents might not tell you how to cook a meal, but that doesn't mean that you don't have ways of finding out how to cook. Same thing applies to this other line from the same portion of our video. This one about the Monty AR plushie. Quote again, "It's hard to look at." Well, S's would read that and interpret it that maybe it's bright, it's shiny. It is physically hard to look at because it's an AR object, so maybe that's why. But N's would read that line and probably read it differently. Nothing else Cassie says about the other AR objects in the game imply that they're difficult to look at least from a physical perspective. So what makes the Monty AR thing so different? Well, maybe because it's not physically difficult to look at, but emotionally difficult to look at. It's hard to look at because she knows the truth about what Monty did to Glamrock Bonnie. But here's the big one, and this is the one that honestly has divided the fan base for the better part of the last year. It is this line used to market the new Tales from the Pizzaplex books. Quote, "A collection of new Five Nights at Freddy's short stories set in the world of the newest game." This one line has been used time and time again to say that these Tales from the Pizzaplex books, they are 100% canon, one for one with the game's stories.
I'm pretty sure the first book had nothing to do with the pizza
That
plex.
right there, that is a very S interpretation, a literal interpretation of what's being said. But there's also the N interpretation of that line. You can be set in a world without it being the same world. I think Rye Toast actually said this one best.
This Super Mario Brothers movie that just came out, that's set in the Mario Brothers universe, 100%, but it's not canon to the games.
Hey Rye, your end's showing. But that's always how the books have operated, and so many, myself included, have treated these new books in the same way, and as a result, we've gotten lots of hate for it. I mean, it's not an invalid interpretation, it's just a different, less literal interpretation than one that many of you on Reddit are familiar with. And it's one that honestly is more in line with statements that Scott has made in the past about the books. Though, can we all be honest with ourselves here? That line was cut from all the marketing. It's gone, it doesn't exist anymore. You have to dig up like historical websites to find it. It's now been replaced with this line that is published across all the books. Scott Cawthon spins 3 sinister novella-length tales from uncharted corners of his series as canon. And again, that right there, that is even more vague and non-specific, because look, we're talking about areas that are uncharted, never explored before, which honestly, even if you're choosing to read that line with a literal interpretation, feels like it's even more support for them not being 100% canon with the games, since we have charted a lot of the topics that you see in some of these stories, like the Gregory story. Great example. We know how he acts in the game. It is slightly different than how he acts in the book.
Either we're not canon.
Not one for one. It cannot be literal. I'm just pointing it out. It is a difficult position to defend.
It's just like all the books.
And all of that is without
some parts of the books are canon, and other parts aren't.
The books and the games.
Like all the books have been.
Like the fact that there isn't a giant baobab tree in the middle of the Pizzaplex. The fact that the Pizzaplex is not shaped like a giant pizza slice in the game, as it is in the books. The fact that there isn't a giant VR AR dome that's turning people into Fazgoo, and that there's no roller coaster that's running through the center of the restaurant. And
Fazgoo is not real.
those are just some of the differences that pop to the top of my head. I have seen people online picking and choosing certain stories to be canon and certain stories to not be canon. And again, I have to call out, isn't that just picking and choosing certain evidence pieces to forward your intended narrative? And do you see the irony in that? Those of you who are convinced that the books are canon are doing exactly the same thing that you criticize online theorists of. You have an answer that you're committed to, and so every theory is based on a core assumption. And if it's okay for you, then it has to be okay for us too. In the end, here's the important thing to remember. We're all on the same team. We're all working towards the same goal. We are trying to solve this franchise together as completely as possible.
Nah, Matt Pat's like a supervillain. I'm just saying, like,
satisfying evidence-based answers we can, because we all love this franchise. We all love a good mystery, and we all want the answers. And the way that we get to those answers is by being open to all ideas, no matter where or what personality type they're coming from. And even when we do get things right, it's okay. And it's also important to occasionally revisit those answers, because guess what? This franchise changes, it evolves, it adds more lore in places that you least expect. So when someone makes a big old swing, don't be quick to write them off. I mean, I suspected that Chica was a mediocre melody, just out of the blue, and that Mr. Hippo was at one point one of the core animatronic lineup. Both things that at the time seemed like pretty big swings back in the day, but both things that at this point actually have a lot of evidence to back them up. So sometimes those big risk theories actually yield some pretty big rewards. In the end, remember, it's easy to point at someone else's ideas and find the holes, but it's actually a lot harder to then offer up your own solutions. It takes guts to put yourself out there and concoct a theory, so be nice to other people's ideas, because that's the way we learn. That's the way we grow. We do it by asking questions and making mistakes. If
this dude is trying to teach me.
The first time out,
I'm not trying to learn right now.
There wouldn't be any mystery
Let's
to this,
see.
right? The games wouldn't be as fun. It would be kind of
40
boring.
minutes.
And honestly, it wouldn't have spawned this incredible franchise
This
that we
is
have
an
today.
hour.
It also wouldn't have spawned this amazing merch.
Yeah,
Like
we
the
got
Springtrap
2 hours
jacket,
left.
which we
What?
Yep, and this, yeah, okay, great, thank you. Thank you for that one, Mr. Tom. You're the best. All this incredible.
I want to see
Five
the
Nights at Freddy's merch available
Springtrap
down
thing
at
you're
the
talking about.
merch shelf.
Oh. It does look cozy. It does look really cozy.
Angel Soft toilet paper is strong.
So, my secret's out. I can finally be honest with you. I'm in the FNAF movie! Oh, and it's been a year! And not only was I in the FNAF movie, my scene was the first scene shot of the entire production. Day one, scene one, I was there. I also got to meet Scott Cawthon after 8 years of us dancing around each other for the first time in person. But you know what? We're gonna get to all that. First and most importantly, I just need to apologize. I'm sorry that I had to lie to you for the better part of the last year to make it seem like I wasn't a part of this whole thing. I'm sorry that there were so many of you that were convinced that I wasn't in it and were mad at the production on my behalf. Trust me, I would have been mad at the production too if I had thought the same thing. I never wanted to cause any sort of stress or anxiety or bad feelings.
I kind of wish Markiplier could have been in it, but he was busy making other stuff.
To any one of you out there, and honestly, for what it's worth, I cannot tell you how wonderful it was for me to see so many of you up in arms defending my right to be a part of this thing. I see each of you, and I appreciate what you guys were doing. Seriously, it meant the world to see so many of you care and defend me like that. It was awesome. I just hope that the surprise of me walking out on stage and being revealed to be in this thing was worth all the fake out. And let me be clear, at the end of the day, no one from the movie once gave me any sort of instructions on how to handle this whole situation. No one swore me to secrecy, there was no paperwork, there were no explicit instructions of what I could and couldn't say. It was all kind of implied. Everything else was just kind of on me. But I also knew that if I didn't cover the movie or do like live reactions to the trailers on GT Live, things like that, that you all would probably figure it out. You would sense that something was off about our content calendar, that I was hiding something from you, and in turn, that would just ruin the production secret. And let me tell you, I did not expect them to make my life so incredibly difficult, especially when they started throwing YouTuber cameos into the trailers themselves. Thanks for that one there, guys. Is that Dawko? No, are you kidding me?
Where to?
Are you kidding me? Fun fact, by the way, they actually had me read for that role literally a week before their filming started. So there I was, awkwardly in my basement at midnight on a Friday with Steph filming me reacting to a giant robot bear in the imaginary backseat of my invisible taxi cab.
No! Oh! Not cool, man! Not cool!
Oh, and also, in case you were wondering...
But, you know... Corey took that.
Actually being in the movie kind of made making theories predicting what was going to be in the movie a bit tricky. I had the whole script, and so basically, unless they rewrote the whole thing, I knew basically all the major story beats.
Unless he
I
was.
felt like I would be cheating somehow or spoiling the movie
I've never watched
in advance.
I've never watched the FNAF movie. I want to.
Unfairly. So instead, that film theory prediction of the movie was one of the few times where I actually took a complete step back from the channel and was almost entirely leaving the script in someone else's hands, letting Film Theory's creative director Lee handle all of the heavy lifting based on information that was available via the trailers. And I gotta say, I was surprised with just how much he got right, and also some of the things that he missed, but you know what? That's a theory for another day.
Anyway, so yeah, almost exactly 1 year ago, all the way back in November of 2022, I was contacted by Blumhouse to be a part of the movie, or Bad Cupcake, as they were calling it back then. It was the secret code name so no one discovered what it was. A week before flying out, they were still shuffling me around to see what my part would be, and on February 1st, day one, scene one, I was in New Orleans to film this thing. Hey there. Welcome to Sparky's. Okay, but let's get real. The whole actor thing is kind of crazy. They're like, no, we will bring the stuff to you, and oh, you can stay in your trailer. I'm like, it's okay. I can go get my own food. They're like, no, but you are the actor. One thing off the bat that I didn't expect was actually the scale of this thing, because it was massive. And you're probably thinking, well, no duh, Matt, it was a movie, but I guess that never really registered with me. I mean, I've done professional theater before, I've done things like big Mr. Beast shoots where he takes over entire football stadiums. How different could this actually be? Well, it was different. It was huge. I have never seen anything this size before. The number of people, the coordination. I had a costume fitting the day before, and for my dinky little cameo of 3 lines in this movie, I kid you not, they had me try on 20 different combinations of outfits, all of which had to then be run by the director and Scott for their approval. I mean, an entire floor of a building was just full wall to wall of clothing, hundreds and hundreds of outfits. Mike alone had practically an entire wall all to himself. It was actually there that I got to see who else was gonna be a part of this movie up on the wall. That's where I actually learned that Corey was gonna be a cab driver for the first time. It was also where I saw that good old Markiplier was supposed to be the security guard who gets killed at the very beginning of the movie.
Dang! Markiplier was supposed to get killed.
It's there that I also saw the withered, dabbing Chica posted on the wall, like some sort of guardian angel over the production.
Either Scott purposely did that, Oh, it's lore accurate.
Basically, I was just doing the whole theorist thing by trying to pick up as many small details and Easter eggs as I could in what few moments I had left unsupervised. Funny enough, it turns out the production staff were trying to do the exact same thing right back at me. From the moment I stepped into my first costume fitting, people started to grill me about FNAF. It's no joke. Apparently, they had been briefed that I was someone who had studied the franchise a lot, and so I was getting inundated with all sorts of questions about the type of person that Mike is, or how I saw William Afton in my mind's eye, or whether I could give them information about characters like Abby. I honestly think it was them trying to get a feel for whether they were on the right track with all of this, how the community as fans might respond to all of this world that they'd created, which honestly is pretty cool. The same thing happened the next day when we were on location at the shoot, where all the other actors in my scene between setups would take time to ask me about how their characters behaved in the games, how their role fit into the overarching narrative of the franchise, which I gotta say was kind of a bummer because all the characters in my scene were just made up for the movie. So didn't have a whole lot of detail to impart on them. So instead of all that, Heather Stewart Masterson, she's Aunt Jane in the movie, she just ended up asking me a lot of questions about the parallels between Abby and Baby from the game, since that's the one that her character is probably most focused on. In general though, it was clear that across the board, everyone was so eager to do the franchise justice. They wanted to know as much as they could. They wanted to learn. They wanted to absorb all that information, and they were proud to be a part of a project and being able to show it off. The only sad part of it all was that I was so early in this process, most of the stuff wasn't even ready for me to see yet. They really wanted to show me the pizzeria, but schedule-wise, the first month of production was dedicated to everything happening outside of the pizzeria, meaning that the set, it was still being built. It was still in process. So when they took me to see it, I just got a lot of blank walls. And don't get me wrong, they were impressive blank walls. Very big, very majestic blank walls, but still, left a lot to the imagination. Same thing kind of happened when they showed me the animatronics. Everything was still locked away because it needed final testing, so the most I got was like a little peek through a sliver in the wall. It's awesome. I think I could make out the murder mask. I'm like, what's up with that weird Freddy head? And they're like, I don't know, creative decision. But come to think of it, it actually kind of worked out really well, because when it came time to react to the trailers when they were being uploaded to YouTube, I didn't have to fake anything, because it was truly my first time getting to see all of this thing finished. Sure, I knew the storyline of the movie. I had the whole script in my hands, and I knew what part I played in this whole thing, but seeing it all, actually getting to experience how it all worked together, it was my first time. No fake reactions here, my friends. And to be honest, seeing it on camera doesn't do the scale of this whole thing justice. I cannot stress to you how massive this production was. They literally built an entire restaurant inside of an old abandoned Home Depot in New Orleans. Hallways, rooms, it was a complete restaurant, which was just mind-blowing to me.
They built FNAF pizzeria in a Home Depot that was abandoned.
Probably tried to do some clever camera tricks or green screening or something, but no, they built an entire building from the ground up inside of another building. It was crazy. As far as my role in all of this, I had a one-day shoot, and that actual day I had to wake up at 4 a.m. and then find a car that had been left for me in a random parking garage the night before. Inside the car were explicit driving instructions to a secret location. Really felt like something straight out of a spy movie. From there, I drove an hour out of town to a random diner that had been shut down due to COVID. Once we were on location, they actually gave me my own trailer. They told me that's not the sort of thing that a day player would normally get, but they wanted to give us YouTubers the star treatment, which I gotta say was just like incredibly generous of them. That's right. Got 3 lines, baby. That's what I get. It's nice. This is where I'm gonna be hanging out. This is where the next 2 episodes of Game Theory are gonna be written, probably. Inside my trailer, I found this guy right here. Little rubber chicken head, little pencil topper. He was in one of the drawers, and so I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna work him into my character. And so if you see him in the movie, that's it. It's a little Easter egg for you. And from there, it was on to set where for the next 8 hours, we were working on a single scene. Now, one diner scene. You heard that right. 8 straight hours. One thing. Why so long? They had the cameras set up outside. Then they had to move the cameras inside. Then they had to have the specialty close-up cameras. Then they had to remove half the booth to capture one side of a conversation, then remove the other half of the booth, replace the other half of the booth to capture the other side of the conversation. Then they had to remove the booth entirely so they could put cameras right here and capture a close-up of my face. There were B-rolls of different tables getting served. There were B-rolls and specialty shots of dishes getting served up at the window. It was a lot for what ultimately amounts in the movie to be like 3 minutes of footage. As you might imagine, we all started to get a bit creative with how we were filling our time with each take.
What are you doing?
I'm filming this for eventually when I do the like, hey, I was in this movie and it's behind the scenes.
Oh my goodness.
Wow, so no pressure. Hey, The lengthy time between takes as they moved cameras along also gave me plenty of chances to explore the set.
She was
for
so
any
happy
hints
being there.
of
Right there.
lore. And I actually found a lot of really fun details buried in the walls. Like, here's one time where I found the fake diner's registration information. Here's another one where I found a QR code that I was almost convinced was trying to be a start of some new ARG. Then I learned that it wasn't. At which point, I decided to call that detail out to the production team as being anachronistic, since this was meant to be set at a time before QR codes became mainstream. And then they promptly took it down. So, TLDR of this entire video, I single-handedly saved the FNAF movie. By the way, on the subject of small details, I don't know if you noticed it in the movie, but the diner I work in is called Sparky's Diner, which is a reference to one of the earliest urban legends from the first FNAF game, that there was this dog animatronic named Sparky hidden somewhere inside. The movie is actually full of these sorts of Easter eggs. For instance, my character's official name, right here, it's Ness. I don't know if you've noticed this one in the movie, but it's Ness. And I was told by everyone that Scott specifically called out that he needed me to be named Ness. At first, I immediately thought like, oh, this gotta be a reference to Ness from FNAF AR. Or maybe this is another instance of Vanessa from Security Breach. You know, just Scott trolling people by using the same name over and over again.
Probably not.
No, when I met him later in the day, he told me it was a reference to Sans' Ness. He was very proud of himself. Speaking of, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Scott Cawthon. The whole time, it was unclear whether Scott would actually be there on set. It was one of those things that people were like, we don't know if Scott's gonna be there. He might show up. We asked him if he's gonna show up on the first day. I thought that was a little bit weird. I mean, it's your first day of shooting your movie that's been like 5+ years in the making. I don't know, you'd think that you'd try to make an appearance there or something, right? Well, he did, but apparently it was a big surprise. He flew in special for that day.
To hear this electric crackle of carbonation, described as crispy, not crisp, crispy.
No.
Sounds
Coke
just
is
about
not
perfect.
Root beer's better.
It
Way
was
better.
interesting. Most of the production crew didn't know who he was. They just knew him as the VIP on set, who everyone had to listen to if he asked them to do something, but no one actually understood what he was, that he was the creator of the game. I think ultimately it winds up being a movie thing, you know, where he's just responsible for talking to the director, who's then the one who's executing on his creative vision. So a lot of the rest of the day-to-day staff don't really need to know that this is the man that gave them a reason to be there in the first place. But yeah, I got to meet him. It was great.
They should know.
Good, strong handshake, and he looks you in the eye when you
I mean,
talk.
he's the reason why that movie's happening.
Upstanding person. He was wearing a classic Zelda t-shirt, which big props to that one. And he was doing a great job, honestly, of directing everyone. I overheard him consulting some of the costume department and clearly outlining his vision of what everyone should be wearing, which was really cool. I think most people would probably have been intimidated by this massive production, all leaning on him, but
Did they just leak Vanessa's actual last name, or is that just like
clearly outlining his vision of what
There's
everyone
no way
should
her
be
last
wearing.
name is Vanessa Shelley. Is that?
Which was
I don't know if that's
cool.
more accurate.
I think
That's her
most
whole name.
people would probably have been intimidated by this massive production, all leaning on him, but it was just really impressive to watch. He made sure that I knew about the whole Ness joke, and also about how he gave the waiter role bonus lines. In fact, he was so proud of that one line that he asked me to go over the top with it like I do in the videos as part of the scene, and I did it for one take, and it was weird, especially with everyone else in the scene taking the scene so seriously, and so we all decided to keep it a bit more toned down. He took off before I left for the day, and I said, I'll see you again at the premiere. And, well, there's no premiere, so I guess that's the last time I'm ever gonna see him. Oh, and no, to answer your obvious question, we did not talk about lore. We both swore that one off. Instead, we talked about the community and how we both expected the community to take this particular script. In the end, he was just really grateful for me being able to be a part of the movie, and that was mind-blowing to me, because I'm like, are you kidding? I was the one who was lucky. I got to be in this mainstream movie. How cool is that? Growing up, acting was one of my dreams. To be a performer, that was always like the end goal for me for like the first 18 years of my life. And since then, that goal's obviously changed a lot. I've moved on, I've done something honestly that I'm more proud of here, where I'm able to make a business and perform as myself instead of as a character. But this was, in a lot of ways, a realization of that dream that baby MatPat had nearly a decade ago. I actually recorded a bit of my thoughts as I was getting ready to leave the
It's
set.
familiar in that.
It felt important to document.
And that's a wrap.
I was there. I was in it. Kinda sad.
But
but it was cool to see a childhood dream in some ways get realized.
It was kind of like I got a peek into a multiverse of another life of mine. And then that was it. Back home, like nothing had ever happened. I did keep the pencil topper and the name tag as souvenirs though, so yes, I did steal from the set of FNAF the movie.
Good.
For 2 days, this was just a small window into something that was so big. I got to be a visitor in this massive machine that I hopped off of, and then that just continued on without me. But man, let me tell you, it is surreal to see posters going up in theaters of a movie that you're in. Oh, and can I level with you for a second? This whole thing, it was so intimidating. You know how I keep doing videos this year about being in the PGA Tour or producing a Broadway show, and how the theme of the year happens to be like, say yes and to your life. Well, this was actually the first of those things because it was at the top of the year. This was the thing that got me started on the whole theme, because it is one thing to speak as yourself on a couch about things that you know, and it is something entirely different to walk in as a complete noob and say scripted lines as a random character named after a meme to a crew of seasoned actors while they're stopping public traffic outside and 50 production staff are slowly zooming a camera into your face. I mean, I've done a lot of performances, but this was just at another level. The only thing that I asked the director, Emma, to make sure of was that I didn't deliver some sort of like cringy YouTuber performance. You know what I mean. It can't not be cringy when you're saying your like own catchphrase. That's kind of silly. But you know, I didn't want to bring the movie down. And to be honest, I think I did all right. Anyway, that right there, my friends, that is my story, and it feels so good. So good to finally come clean about it. I have wanted to bring you in as a part of this journey for the longest time. In the end, I cannot thank the team there enough for all their incredible generosity and their patience. And Scott, thank you for giving me the chance to be a part of this. But most importantly, thank you. This whole thing, this is our collective victory, right? Because without you supporting me or supporting these channels and supporting these wacky theories, none of this would have been possible. And if you haven't seen the movie, then what the heck are you waiting for? Watch it.
I want to watch it.
And then go watch it again.
Yo.
Show them the force of Team Internet so that the late night hosts and the executive producers finally learn that things from the internet deserve to be pronounced correctly. Anyway, in the end, who knows? Maybe there'll be room in the sequel for the return of a well-meaning, cringy waiter with a love of breakfast and a meme-ish name. But until then, remember, that's not a theory. It's just a video. Video for you. Thanks for watching.
My bad. Did he finish that? I don't know if I watched this one. Yo, what's up, doggo? I feel like you're still watching. Alright, let's see. So, we got... This is an hour. That makes it an hour. Jeez, 2 hours left? 2 more hours.
Let them cook. Me, on the other hand, will be keeping cool this summer with 20% off all orders from...
Hello, Internet. Welcome to Film Theory, the show that knows that a picture is worth 1,000 words.
The drawings show them what really happened.
And what did you draw? A yellow rabbit hitting the subscribe button?
They can see you now.
Well, great. That is the point of the subscribe button, after all. Thanks, Abby. Finally it's happened.
I got 7 more videos. That's an hour
years in
long.
development hell,
2 hours
hopping
long.
from studio to studio, director to director, the Five Nights at Freddy's movie is finally out for you to go see right now. And man, has this been a commercial hit. As of the writing of this script,
I don't want to continue this tomorrow.
Release, the movie's made over
We got a gameplay tomorrow.
$152 million at the box office, more than 7 times its own budget, and that's despite being available to stream on Peacock, where, oh wait, it's also the most viewed movie on Peacock ever. Suck on that, my big fat Greek wedding 3. It's also Blumhouse's most successful opening weekend to date, which means that more people are turning out to see Springtrap wielding his knife than Michael Myers. Maybe now Hollywood will finally bother to get the name of this thing right.
And his other movie, Friday Nights at Freddy's, comes to theaters.
Friday Nights at Freddy's.
On Peacock.
How do you fail the first word, 5 and Friday? Like,
October 27th?
5 Nights at Freddy's.
What did I say?
Friday nights. It's been 8 or 9 years since I first met Scott Cawthorn, who created this.
Why do we get it
5
wrong?
nights.
Or not. Who cares? Forget them. This thing was made for the fans. From Sparky the dog to Dream Theory to...
It's just a theory.
You bet it is, and today we're getting back to those theorist roots. Today we're theorizing about the actual movie, and Boy, is there a lot to talk about here. True story, after the movie, I basically locked myself in the room with Lee and Tom, the film and game theory creative directors. We busted out our trusty whiteboard to figure out exactly
I don't
what was
think
going
he
on.
met Scott Cawthon 8 or 9 years ago. You can't.
What did I say?
Friday nights. It's been 8 or 9 years since I first met Scott Cawthon, who created.
Yeah, there's no way he met this guy 8 or 9 years ago when he first started. If he's calling him Scott Cawthon.
Figurine. How's no one freaked out by the fact that there are bodies in those animatronics? Wasn't this like the most structurally unsound table for it of all time? That last one, perhaps the biggest mystery of them all. Today, we're going to be looking at all the Easter eggs, secrets, and hidden lore from the movie, then comparing those to other parts of the franchise, both the books and the games, in order to predict where the story of the FNAF 2 movie is going to go years before they actually make it. So that's our one job for today, but before we get to it, I also have to shout out our brand new line of officially licensed FNAF theory wear.
Who are those people? I don't know those people. Goodbye.
Theory, shall we? So to begin, we should point out that we already do have some vague idea where the sequel's gonna head. In an interview with Variety, FNAF director Emma Tammy explained that the first movie was tied to the first game, so a second film would likely tie into a second game, which, kinda goes without saying, but also should probably make our lives easy, right? Yeah, not quite. As we mentioned,
I wonder what the third movie is gonna be like, because it's probably gonna be based off the third game. So it's gonna be weird. In this.
Our first prediction theory, the strategy for the movieverse seems to be taking iconic bits and pieces from across the entire franchise, games, books, fan theories, even hoaxes, and distilling it all down into the most recognizable version of FNAF there is. That's how we got Mike Schmidt from FNAF 1, hanging out with Vanessa from Security Breach, fighting Springtrap from FNAF 3, and saving Abby from getting stuck into a Springlock version of Ella from the Silver Eyes novel, with an ending that was ripped straight out of the fourth closet. It is literally FNAF the smoothie. Everything dumped into a blender, chopped up, and then poured back out onto the big screen. So yeah, while it did follow the same broad strokes as the first game, 5 nights in the FNAF 1 pizzeria with ghost kids in suits, it is definitely not the same story. It's also important to note the changes to the story that have been added in. One example has to be the time that these movies take place. It's widely accepted that the FNAF 1 video game takes place somewhere around 1993, and yet in this scene from the movie, we see a date on a security camera that reads April 6th, 2000, about 7 years later. Another big example, though we've long theorized that the story of the original FNAF games takes place in Utah, that is not the case in the film. In the film, during the scene where Aunt Jane is confronting Mike at Abby's school, her lawyer hands Mike some family court paperwork. If you pause and read the fine print on the documents, you'll find the URL mncourts.gov, which is the official website for the Minnesota judicial system. Additionally, we can see a phone number with the area code 651, which is connected to the St. Paul area and eastern suburbs of Minnesota. And get this, I kid you not, there's a small town in this area code named Afton. You cannot make that up. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Scott moved the entire movie to Minnesota just for that change alone. Lastly, there's also this decal on Vanessa's police cruiser, GFPD. PD stands for police department. That part's pretty darn obvious, but then what about the GF? Well, honestly, that could stand for any city or township with those same initials, from Grand Forks to Glen Falls to Great Falls, but included in that list is Granite Falls, just 2 hours west of St. Paul, whose cop cars, at least according to the website, follow the exact same black and white color pattern that we see in the movie. Speaking of clues from the cars that are seen throughout the movie, we can also reasonably assume that Mike's brother Garrett was kidnapped in the early 80s, based on this shot from Mike's dream sequence. By taking the rear end of William Afton's car here and reverse image searching for it, we're able to identify this as a Ford Fairmont Futura. Specifically, the model is coming from between 1980 and 1983. You can immediately see the connections here between the unique vertical taillight design and the boxy body shape. But why then does that matter? Well, Mike's brother Garrett is likely the first child that Afton abducted and killed. In Mike's dream flashbacks, we very clearly see Garrett holding a toy airplane as he's being taken away in the back of Afton's car. And where do we see that airplane again? When Vanessa reveals Afton to be her father. She's holding the same airplane. That right there, that is cold. Gifting toys from your victims to your daughter. But not only is it gross, it's also helpful because it lets us put together a rough timeline. You see, Afton and Vanessa are clearly in a still operational pizzeria in this photograph, which means it had to have been taken before the other kids went missing, causing Freddy's to shut down. In other words, Garrett was the first of Afton's victims that we currently know of. And that right there, that's important because in the games, Afton's first victim, and the one most closely associated with his car, goes on to possess the puppet, a marionette-esque character that serves as
Wasn't it Chica?
the protector and guide to all the other spirit children. It's the first victim that gives gifts and gives life to the other animatronics after their murders. We see this possession happening in FNAF 6's security puppet minigame. Notice the tire tracks out there in the rain. We see the exact same event from a different angle in FNAF 2. Notice that cool purple car. From there, the rest of FNAF 2's hidden minigames then show us the puppet puppet trying to protect the other dead children from Afton. And when it can't, the puppet decides to bring them to life in the form of animatronics. The robotic voice here is spelling out save them. Does it sound familiar? It should. That same robotic voice appears at the very end of the movie's credits.
C-O-M-E-F-I-N-E-M-E.
Once the whole thing wraps, the voice has spelled out, "Come find me," in the exact same way that the puppet communicated to the player in the FNAF 2 minigames. And who needs to be found in the movie? Garrett. See, the fact that they never resolved what exactly happened to Garrett was a big thing that stuck out to me when I was watching this thing. After all, it was Mike's entire motivation and his only clear outright connection to both Afton and Vanessa. His fate is definitely going to come up again in the sequel, and all the signs are pointing to the puppet from the FNAF 2 video game. What's more, did you notice the music that was playing during that section? It's a music box. Another nod to the puppet, who in the games is kept calm by constantly winding a music box. In short, Garrett is possessing the puppet in this world, and here he is literally trying to tell Mike and the audience to come find him in the sequel. But stop for a minute and consider the method of Afton's crime here. It is different from all the rest. He's out in nature. He kidnaps Garrett and presumably leaves him alive longer than his normal victims. He keeps the kid's toy and then gives it to his daughter. They're even in a completely different state. Unlike the rest of Afton's crimes, where he just lures kids to the back of the pizzeria and kills them, here, things feel premeditated. They feel personal. And that would align with both the games and the books, where Afton's first murder isn't just a random killing, it's targeted against one person, his business partner and the original builder of the animatronics, Henry.
Small souls trapped in prisons of my making, now set to new purpose. A wound first inflicted on me, but then one that I let bleed out to cause all of this.
In fact, in the novel trilogy, Afton does the exact same thing that he does in the movie. He kidnaps Henry's daughter, Charlie, before ultimately killing her. Basically, all signs point to Garrett not just being a random victim, but rather to him being the son of Afton's partner and rival, Henry, the man who helped Afton build all of the animatronics. See, as I was piecing together the details from the movie, I started to notice something. The Afton and Schmidt families from the movie seem awfully close to the family structures from the games, except in reverse. You see, in the game series, we know that Afton has himself 3 children, Michael, Crying Child, and Elizabeth. The oldest son, Michael, plays a prank as a kid which gets his younger brother killed in the iconic Bite of 1983. From there on, Mike becomes obsessed with atoning for his mistake, eventually becoming a security guard and releasing the spirit of his brother into the afterlife. Then there's Elizabeth, who eventually gets trapped and dies inside a baby, a suit that is increasingly looking to be a spring-lock animatronic. Now let's check out the Schmidt family over in the movie. You have, again, a family of 3, 2 boys and a girl. Mike, the older brother, is a security guard who's obsessed with atoning for the time that he got his younger brother Garrett kidnapped and killed. Then there's Abby, who's nearly trapped and killed inside the Ella suit, a spring-lock animatronic. They literally match 1 for 1. Meanwhile, Afton in the movie seems to have himself only 1 daughter, Vanessa, just like Henry had himself 1 daughter, Charlie, in the games. So if they've switched dynamics, that could make Mike's dad here the representative of Henry Emily from the games.
Our mom died a little while back, and Dad, he couldn't handle it, so...
They leave Mike's dad's fate vague. To me, looks like it was deliberately done in case they ever wanted to bring Mike's dad back into the story in a role similar to Henry's. But perhaps most interesting of all, if you look in the background of the employee training video, you can see a man who looks very similar to Mike's dad working on the animatronics, just like Henry would have done in the game's canon. This is also, as far as I can tell, an uncredited performance, but one look at Mike's dad, this guy from the training video, and the way that Henry's portrayed in places like the character encyclopedia, it shows a visual design connection between the 3 of them. But not only would this connection fit with the established game lore, it would also explain why William Afton recognizes Mike. Early in the movie, we see Afton have a moment of recognition when he reads Mike's last name,
Mr. Michaels.
But according to US Census data, there's around 166,000 people with the last name Schmidt here in the US. So either this is just a case of pure movie coincidence, or William recognizes not only the last name Schmidt, but Mike Schmidt specifically in the general age range that his partner's son would be. That's why he's so sure that this is someone from his past. More evidence for this? The fact that William knows that Mike has a brother without it ever being addressed.
This is perfect. First I killed your brother, now I killed you.
Sure, we can assume the spirit children told him.
Little ones tell me you have a sister.
Or maybe Vanessa, but that's a bit less satisfying than him just knowing and taking out his vendetta against every member of the Schmidt family. And for those of you saying that Henry's last name is Emily, it might be, but that's never actually been officially confirmed. We've always thought it was a bit bizarre to have as a last name, and let's be honest, it could just as easily be Charlie's middle name, Charlotte Emily Schmidt. But last, let's talk about William. You'll notice that I just pulled the line that indicates that the spirits talk to William
Henry
throughout
Miller,
this movie.
Dave
It's
Miller.
a very important detail. In fact, if you notice, they really gave Afton a lot of explicit control control over what the spirits are doing here. See, while he seems to understand what was happening in the games, it never seemed like he could outright control the animatronics. In the book,
That could be like Henry's role last night. That William Afton used his fake name as
it's a little bit
Dave,
different. He eventually is able to control the animatronics, but not
Henry.
until the last novel of the trilogy. Here, though, he seems to understand all of it from the get-go. They tell him about Abby. He understands the importance of the pictures on the wall.
What have you done?
And as the spring locks in his suit are going off and he's dying, what does he do? He basically looks directly in the camera, says his catchphrase,
I always come back,
and puts on the Springtrap helmet. Why? What sense would that make? Well, it's a pretty clear indication that this Afton explicitly knows how possession works, and it involves being completely put inside of the suit like this. Putting on that helmet is basically Afton accepting his fate, knowing that he'll be back, able to possess the suit and survive. So right here we have ourselves a smarter Afton who is years
Why is Foxy dragging him away?
further in his understanding of the
no
spiritual
sense.
world than either the Afton in the games or the books. Which leads me to this, an animatronic buried in the parts and service room of the pizzeria. One that you can't see in the movie, but you can see in the behind the scenes footage from Dawko during his tour of the movie set. An animatronic with rounded human skull, silver eyes, and human teeth. While this could just be background set dressing, I don't think that's the case. If this is truly an Afton who understands the power of agony in granting eternal life, if this is an Afton who has gone so far as to build a Freddy torture chair for extracting remnant from his victims, I'm thinking his experiments with building passable robotic humans has already begun. This isn't just me playing the Robot Gregory game again. It is the only explanation for the parts and services room to have an animatronic with human teeth and realistic human head proportions and eyes. And above it, hanging from the top of the shop, a robotic hand with 5 fully articulating fingers and human proportions. No other animatronic in this series fits this sort of description. Does this mean he's already built a humanoid, or is this just an early phase of his experiments? It's unclear, but it does give a bit more credit to Vanessa's bloodless stab wound at the end of the movie being more than just an excuse to get itself a PG-13 rating. My real guess, though, is that there's a robot Garrett walking around, and that he'll be the reveal at the end of the movie, just like Charlie the puppet is revealed to be a robot at the end of the 4th closet. A world-shattering revelation for Mike as he comes to terms with the nature of his brother and his father's weird creations before the final movie where he's tasked with having to burn it all down. Honestly, the pieces are in place for us. Or not. All the next movie has to do is drop a Markiplier cameo and then show me a clip of Mangle and I'm in. But hey, one last reminder to check out our incredible officially licensed FNAF merch. Grab them while they are remaining. Remnanting? The last thing you want is the agony.
The Nikon ZF keeps up, no matter the challenge.
Here we are driving down the road, and all of a sudden, bang! Oh! Look at that. You know what we can do now?
Okay, I'll leave you to it. See you on the flip side.
The flip side.
Catch you on the flip side. Hopefully.
I called it. I totally called it. 8 years ago, I told you that the purple guy was the phone guy, and now here we are. William Afton, our killer, is on a phone saying, see you on the flip side, just like phone guy did all those years ago. Finally, I've been vindicated.
Yeah, we still got like hour and a half.
Hello, Internet.
Jeez,
Welcome to Game Theory, the show where every victory is bittersweet. You see, while I should be super happy that I just had one of my oldest FNAF theories confirmed, instead, I'm feeling haunted by the unsolved mysteries of the past. Let me explain. At this point in the series, I feel like we have a really solid understanding of the story. We know the broad strokes, we know the general timeline, and the few big lingering questions that we've struggled with are starting to come into focus. Where's the placement of sister location? Well, the most recent games and books have hinted at its connection to the Fredbear era. What's the origins of Fazbear? Well, the books seem to be giving us more and more hints pointing at the early days of William and Henry's working relationship. What was the deal with FNAF 4? Literally, the final tale of the Pizzaplex all but spells it out for us. All of those are probably theories best saved for a later date, but today, I wanted to focus on something else. The clues that we've all completely missed. The times when this franchise has explicitly tried to tell us something, and we've utterly failed to pick up on what it's been laying down. And let me be clear, I'm not talking about me overanalyzing some minor detail of the game world. I'm talking about very clear puzzles that were very obviously set up by the game makers for us to solve that we've been unable to do anything with. And the reason I'm calling it out now is because they're starting to add up. In my estimation, there have been no less than 4 of these sorts of
Scott should do an update on FNAF 4 and fix the pizzeria thing. And then when they're playing it, just make Snowball a patch notes and just to just fix something.
Major puzzle
And then when you play in the game, you'll see it just fix that one thing.
Better part of 6 years.
Like a week later, then he'll say, "Oh, that's all we did."
Over Doug's apps.
I finally got my appetizers. Thanks, Pat.
Before Help Wanted 2 drops and adds a whole new layer of mysteries to solve, I wanted to take a minute to stop and see if now, finally, we were able to solve these mysteries once and for all. The pieces are in place for us. The question is, are we able to put them together? The first one of these is also the most recent, so it should come as no surprise to see me bringing it up here. The tally marks codes that we found hidden throughout FNAF Ruin. For those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, in the newest game, right before you reach Bonnie Bowl, there's a corridor with a number of real doors, as well as several blocked off AR doors. If you walk through one of the real life doors, you'll find a room full of baby plushies. This is already a bit weird because the game makes it a point to call out the fact that Baby should not be here. Specifically with the AR plush baby toy where the description reads, quote, "What's she doing here?" The answer, we suspect, is that the Pizzaplex, sister location, the FNAF 6 location, and the FNAF 4 house are all practically built on top of each other. Or at the very least exist.
Why do you just keep building things on top of each other? Because the pizzeria, so FNAF 6 is under the Pizzaplex, and sister location is under FNAF 6, or is above it. Sister location is under it. FNAF 4 must be on top of the Pizzaplex. What? Why would the Pizzaplex be underground?
As one connected series of buildings. We go into the basement of the Pizzaplex, only to find the FNAF 6 location.
Well, no, the Pizzaplex is like, yeah, it's underground. What?
Secret ending of Ruin, we see a version of sister location Scooper deactivating the Mimic. And in one of the final Tales of the Pizzaplex stories, we read about how the FNAF 4 house is connected to Circus Baby's entertainment and rentals. So really, to answer Cassie's question, the baby plushies are here because they all share a connected history. A history that is gradually being excavated layer by layer underneath the Pizzaplex. Anyway, in this room, the dolls laugh at you, and then, when you turn around, they disappear. Nothing all that surprising. But what is surprising is what remains in the left-hand corner right where the plushies sat. You'll find a chair turned to face the corner and a sequence of tally marks carved into the wall. And these aren't just random markings either. They're specifically in groups of 2s, 4s, and 5s. And they're grouped in such a way to suggest words, or at the very least, separate letters. Now, that alone would be weird, but an even bigger, clearer display of tally marks appears again about an hour later into the game. After completing Bonnie Bowl, you enter Bonnie's green room behind the bowling alley. Not only does this area show us the special relationship that existed between Freddy and Bonnie, if you put on the Vanny mask, on the wall over top of the pin-loading staff bot is another code, much larger and much more organized than the one that we just saw before. And once again, all the tally marks here are specifically grouped into 2s, 4s, and 5s. No 1s or 3s in sight. They are obviously meant to be connected. They're obviously trying to tell us something, but we are obviously not getting the message. So what can we do? Well, the first answer is to try a substitution cipher. Tally up the numbers and swap in the appropriate letters. Notice though that the tally marks are weirdly spaced out, which led a bunch of us to believe that we're supposed to be using those spaces to define each letter, adding up the numbers that aren't separated by the space. So the top line there is going to be 4, then a space, then 544, which would add up to 13. It's a pretty darn self-explanatory system here. Doing that for the whole thing gives us a code of 4, 13, 6, 19, 4, 17, 7, 4, 16, 10, 8, 7, 27, 19, which, if you do a standard number to letter conversion, gives you this. DM, FS, D, Q, G, yeah. You know what, I'm just gonna leave it there. Clearly, this isn't working. It's just a bunch of random letters. You'll also notice that there's a 27 in that number mix, which should have been our first red flag, considering that, you know, there's only 26 letters in the English alphabet. But Reddit user T-Girl Lunara wasn't deterred. Because the alphabet doesn't have 27 letters, they instead took it a step further and tried the whole thing as a shift cipher. A shift cipher is similar to a Caesar cipher, but instead of the numbers converting into standard letters like A1, B2, C3, etc., you instead mix up or shift the order in some way. So now, for instance, A is 7, B is 8, C is 9, and so on. Normally in a Caesar cipher, the alphabet then loops back around, so if A was 7, Z would then equal 6, but in a shift cipher, that doesn't happen. The numbers just carry on as is. So in this case, if A equals 7, then Z would equal 32. For this particular instance, T-Girl Lunara put A equaling 4, which meant that 27 was now X, and gave us the entire code of Ajka Pan Damaged XP. Not a lot of lore significance with that one, but I did want to continue down that path. So we tried hundreds of different shift and Caesar ciphers. They all came out as absolute gibberish. We also tried just unscrambling the words. Maybe there was another arrangement in there that would give us a more cohesive answer, but yet again, more gibberish. Another solution was presented presented by user SmartFellaFartSmella, great name there, who also tried adding up the numbers, but this time they didn't do it by adding up the numbers in each group, but instead the numbers in each
Oh, man.
Ready for our big adventure, buddy? Come on.
column. Again, notice the odd spacing of all these tally marks. It can't be a coincidence, right? The first column contains a 4 and a 5, so that would be 9. The second is just the 2, next up is 5, so on and so forth down the line. Ending up with this code. 9, 2, 5, 9, 13, 7, 10, 8, 21, 16, 20, 14, 17, 8, 2, 5, 4, 4. This felt promising to me, because unlike last time, we only had numbers that fell within the alphabet. So converting all of these numbers into letters, we got ourselves the following. Bed. We once again went through with all the classic Caesar ciphers and word unscramblers and all that stuff, but once again wound up with nothing. Back to the drawing board for the third time. An anonymous poster uploaded this onto Imager, and the same point was later brought to my attention by Reddit user NoRate. Basically, what they pointed out was that the tally marks in the corner of Baby's room make a 5x5 grid. A grid that, when rotated or flipped, can map perfectly onto the tally code that we see on the wall of Bonnie Bowl. NoRate actually took this information and pointed out the fact that the main grid arrangement seems to line up with something known as a polybius cipher, which uses a 5x5 grid of letters to scramble or unscramble codes. Basically, a number code like 53 would mean that you go along the top
Hey, bro's
5
texting me because I muted him.
There's the letter for
I timed him out for 10 seconds and I was spamming
at first. Sadly, the method also came up short. With only 2s, 4s, and 5s as the tally marks, the grid wasn't really giving us any information that we could use to decode anything. We needed an entire alphabet in here, not just a few random tally marks. The same held true for another famous 5x5 grid cipher, the Playfair cipher, which requires a code word to use. What could that code word be? Who knows? Did it feel like we were actually starting to make some level of progress here? Yes, absolutely. But did any of it yield us any results?
No.
But here's where things get really interesting. This isn't the first time FNAF has stumped us with tally marks. Rewind backwards 6 years, my friends, to the release of the Freddy Fazbear Security Logbook, home to my two oldest and greatest nemeses, Foxy Grid
and the dabbing Chica. Knew it.
For those of you who haven't been a part of the community for that long, let me quickly tell you that this seemingly innocent children's workbook was pivotal for decoding FNAF 4, for giving us the name of Cassidy, for frustrating us to no end with seemingly unsolvable number puzzles. The most notorious of them all was the Foxy Grid, a numeric grid with a hidden alphabet written into its squares, a grid that we still haven't figured out the use of to this very day. You ever read Moby Dick? At least are you familiar with the story about how Captain Ahab's obsessed with killing this giant white whale? This right here, this Foxy Grid, that is my white whale. This thing haunts my nightmares. This grid keeps me up at night. Which honestly are two very contradictory effects of this one grid on my sleep habits, but that is how infuriating this thing is. I am convinced that this grid will eventually give us the name of the crying child. I just don't know how yet. Anyway, one of the other clues that never really got proper use out of this thing were a series of tally marks that were found throughout the book. The fact that they're in red pen tells us that they were written by Mike. Other than that, we don't really know anything about what they were trying to say to us, and so they've lingered on in the back of my brain for over half a decade. Why am I bringing them up now? Well, I wondered if there was a possible connection between these two sets of tally marks. You know, besides them just being tally marks. Guess what I found? Groups of 4s and 5s only. Yet again, we find ourselves with a collection of tally marks carrying over the same specific sets of numbers. Are they connected? Or is this just a random coincidence? Not really sure, but the fact that tally marks keep getting brought up and also keep stumping us, that's just a wee bit infuriating. And yet the games still aren't done with this puzzle. You see, the tally marks are connected to yet another part of the franchise, Security Breach. Back during my playthrough of the original Security Breach, this room in the daycare section really caught my attention.
I'm noticing that 2, 4, and 5 are different, which is weird. As someone who has dealt with a lot of codes and ARGs and things, that feels suspicious. I agree.
2, 4, and 5. 2 years before ruin, some element, some essence of this tally code was still kicking around. But now the numbers were being matched with colors. And so Reddit user Comfortable Map 7594 took those tally marks and used these colors to create a sort of paint by numbers graphic, which I absolutely adore as a possible solution, though I absolutely hate the fact that it didn't seem to produce anything. Let me know down in the comments. Do you see anything here? Because to me, all I'm seeing here is me getting depressed. So maybe we just take a break from trying to decode these things and instead take a minute to look at the world around these tallies to get a sense of who might be speaking here. As I mentioned, in the security logbook, we know it's Mike, based on the red pen and the signature at the front of the book. But what about in Ruin? Well, in the baby plush room, we have, obviously enough, baby. Not that shocking. But what's especially important to note here is that they're not all baby. See, half the plushies are normal baby,
Yeah,
and
they
the
have
other half are
the green.
scrap baby. What's the big difference? Well, besides the obvious scrap metal plates on their bodies, there's one thing that alternates depending on the version. Something that's been important to baby since the very beginning. Her eye color. The regular baby plushies have blue eyes, while scrap baby has green eyes, showing the two sides of baby before and after Elizabeth's death and possession. But Reddit user Dylan Hippiejink took it one step further. They noticed that the eyes of the baby and scrap baby plushies were scratched out, leaving just the blue right eye from baby and the green left eye for scrap baby.
Oh, it's the one from the tiger
detail, because it directly matches up to the evil entity that we've been battling against throughout the entire game, the Mimic. You see, in the story Tiger Rock, the Mimic AI program takes the form of the digital entity Tiger Rock, a tiger animatronic with a green left eye and a blue right eye. Is this confirming for us that the Mimic AI and baby are somehow one and the same? Or maybe that the Mimic has two souls, or entities that it learned from, just like how baby in the books is two children in one, Elizabeth and Charlie. Not really sure, but that right there, that is a massive revelation that feels super important to solving the mystery. Or at least it did, until I dug a bit more and found out that the scrap baby plushies also sometimes have their left eye missing. It is still a very cool, compelling connection that I'm not willing to fully discount yet. It's just not as consistent as I would have liked as far as evidence goes. The chair, meanwhile, looks like a disciplinary measure. A bad child that was put into timeout, forced to face into a corner and scratching away at the wall to count the hours or days out of boredom. Since this is a room full of ghostly baby plushies, it stands to reason that the punished child here could have been Elizabeth. Obviously not physically here in this room of the Pizzaplex, but with the scene recreating a recurring moment from her past in some ghostly spectral way. We know Afton wasn't really the greatest dad to her. Maybe this right here is a glimpse of his parenting style. As for the tally marks in Bonnie's green room, the font is the same, so they were likely carved by the same person. But honestly, that's where the similarities end. These marks appear in AR land, as opposed to babies, which are in the real world. This implies that whoever made Bonnie's marks either had the Vanny mask at some point, or is connected to the digital network that's running the Pizzaplex. Bonnie's marks are also higher up on the wall, as opposed to babies, which are at floor level, easily reachable by a small child. So then why these two rooms specifically? Well, a few things come to mind. If baby is in fact connected in some way to the Mimic, and or the neural network that runs the Pizzaplex, we can guess that Bonnie is too. When we deactivate the wet floor bots around the Pizzaplex, we also end up deactivating Bonnie. So that connection into the wider Pizzaplex interface may be important here. We also know that both Baby and Bonnie are quote-unquote missing from the Pizzaplex.
Anyway, what Bonnie? Why'd they make Bonnie look like that in the first place?
We also know that both
like, really? Like that?
Baby and Bonnie are quote-unquote missing from the Pizzaplex. Baby isn't supposed to be here, according to that AR description, and Bonnie was decommissioned from the complex. Again, they're obviously loose threads, but in a puzzle with no clear answer that somehow connects two very random, historically unrelated characters like Bonnie and Baby, every small detail here is absolutely worth considering. But that's more than enough talk about tally marks. Let me remind you of yet another numerical code that was just blatantly given to us by the devs that us as a community have been largely unable to solve. Remember those Mylar balloons that I was just freaking out about in Superstar Daycare? Well, they have themselves yet another appearance right here, on the 8th hole of Security Breach's Monty Gator Golf arcade cabinet. On this Balloon Boy themed hole, we get this.
3192. That's suspicious.
A handful of numbered balloons. In reality, the number sequence is actually a lot longer. 6369553192. The fact that these are in Monty Gator Golf immediately made me wonder whether this code was the score they had to get in the game, except there are 10 numbers and only 9 holes. But when has simple math ever stopped the internet? User 00core00 tried a number of different combinations to see whether they could activate anything. Sadly, nothing. Then Ruin released with a new Monty Gator Golf arcade cabinet, and so people like Yusuf0808 tried again using this exact same code and still wound up with nothing. Here's the thing though, both of these games have been data mined to heck and back. If this code was meant to unlock something inside of Monty Gator Golf, we'd have heard about it already, which leads me to believe that it's something actually actually outside of the game. Much like I suspected with the tally marks, it's not about activating some hidden ending, it's about giving us a code, a cipher, a phrase that'll tell us something about the wider world. We just haven't figured out how to use it yet. I've tried converting the letters, ciphers, you name it, I just keep coming up empty-handed. One of our writers even suggested trying hex codes to see if there might be something there. At first it looked positive. The last 6 numbers actually produce a purple that matches the aftons that we know and love so much, but it's not an exact match, nor does the first half of the numbers amount to anything meaningful. Maybe the fact that these are Mylar balloons connected to the multicolored Mylar balloons in the daycare, which then also connects them back to the tally mark puzzle, or maybe I'm just desperately looking.
Maybe the 245 are important. No, other numbers are.
To be had. Now, for all of these lingering puzzles, I was able to find at least a couple of people discussing them online, in Discords, forums, Reddit posts, what have you. But for this last one, nothing. Or at least practically nothing. I could find only 2 posts total, which is exactly why I wanted to raise some awareness about it here, because to me, this seems like a massive clue that largely got overlooked during the wave of reveals that happened throughout Ruin. Early on in the game, we have a chance to revisit the daycare attendance room. This room is nothing new to a FNAF theorist. It was the one that we were able to unlock in Security Breach by photographing random characters throughout the game world. Inside of it, we were able to find the glitchy Balloon World arcade cabinet, a lost relic to a seemingly incomplete path inside the game. So when the room showed up again in Ruin, I wanted to pay extra attention. On the surface, the room seems largely the same, just a bit messier than before. Boxes of stuff, clothing hanging from the wall, some post-it notes scattered around, but then by putting on the Vanny mask, everything resets to normal. The room basically goes back to the way that it was, cleaner, more organized. Nothing all that noteworthy, until of course you start talking about the notes. Those are worthy. All of a sudden on a blank wall, we get ourselves a 3x3 grid of post-it notes. What is it with Steel Wool games and post-it note lore? I mean, if I had a nickel for every time Steel Wool used post-it notes to hint at lore, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. The 9 post-it.
But if you had a nickel for every post-it note, you'd have a lot.
It's that we're dealing with are as follows. One that says groceries with butter written 3 times. There's a collection of dots, a scribble, footprints, hearts and pizza, lightning bolt, sun and hill, stars and a microphone, and a selection of candy. As usual, my first thought was to jump into a cipher. Immediately, you see how some of these post-its can relate to numbers. We have 2 feet, 4 stars, 7 dots, 3 butters, 3 lightning bolts. Felt like a really solid place to start, but obviously it wasn't going to be perfect. We have a pizza post-it, but are we counting the 2 slices of pizza, the 4 hearts, or both? What about that squiggle? What's that stand for? Nothing? How about the hill in the sun? Is this meant to be FNAF 6's graveyard hill, so maybe we're counting gravestones? Or is this more likely counting the number of rays coming off the sun? Overall, converting the post-its to numbers wasn't really given the cleanest solutions, but it did feel like a step in the right direction. From there, when you look up how to solve 3x3 ciphers, the number 1 solution that pops up is the hill cipher. Now, when it comes to codes, a hill cipher is pretty darn complex, but overall, the key to deciphering one is a matrix, a table of numbers. And if you're using the English alphabet with its 26 letters, you're gonna need yourself a 3x3 matrix. Or let's just say a 3x3 grid of post-it notes. The numbers in the matrix represent the shifts that you're gonna have to apply to each letter of the alphabet. To encode a message using a hill cipher, you first convert the message into numbers. You can do this by assigning each letter of the alphabet a number from 0 to 25. For instance, A would be 0, B would be 1, and so on. Next, you multiply each letter of the message by the corresponding matrix. For example, if the first letter of your message is A, you would multiply it by the first row of the matrix. If the second letter of the message is B, you would multiply it by the second row of the matrix. The result is a new number which you can then convert back into a letter, giving you the encoded message. To decode, you just do the same in reverse. For instance, if I had this message, hello, how are you? With this matrix, 321110201, my encoded message would look a little something like this. I'm not even gonna try. Like I said, it's a pretty complex way of encoding something, but let's be honest with ourselves, when has FNAF ever not been complex? And after the wall code from Security
Someone actually had to do that.
Breach got broken in a day, Steel Wool was probably looking for something that's a bit harder, some with a bit more lasting power. So really, a hill cipher seems to fit this new wall code nicely. There's just one problem. What exactly are we decoding? Sure, we have ourselves a rough matrix, but where's the number or letter sequence that we're trying to put through it? The balloons? The tally marks? I ran them both through a few variations of my own matrix. 3 for butters, 7 for dots, 2 for footprints, 4 hearts, etc., etc. But ultimately, I wound up with nothing to show for the whole thing. Again, it felt like we were getting close to a methodology, but I was just missing some crucial step in the process. So I tried a completely different approach. Rather than ciphers, did this collection of images mean something to me? The candy to me looked very similar to the drawings that we saw in the original post-it room from Security Breach. Same goes with the pizzas. The lightning bolts are designed similarly to the charging stations found throughout the Pizzaplex, as well as the bolt of lightning lightning on Glamrock Freddy's chest. Notice the flat tops on the lightning bolts, which makes them distinctly different from other lightning bolts that we've seen across the series, like the controlled shock button from Sister Location. The microphone and stars reminds me of Freddy and the gang. This group of 7 dots, certainly vague, but the number 7 has shown up before in both FNAF VR and the Post-it Room and Security Breach. Usually it represents the 7 victims: 5 missing children, Charlie, and the crying child. 7 dots, 7 graves. You've got the hill in the sun, which is reminiscent of the hill during the Afton and Princess Quest endings, and the butters were obvious references to Sister Location's exotic butters.
Exotic butters.
Overall, all the post-its seem to relate in at least a small tangential way to Michael Afton. Man, he really is becoming like his dad, always coming back to our theories. Reddit user Pikmin King X posted about these 9 drawings and drew all of them back to 2 very important games: Sister Location and Pizzeria Simulator. 2 games where we for sure play as Michael Afton. First, you got the candy that we spoke about. Well, in Pizzeria Simulator, candy's all over the place. In advertisements from Lally's Lollies, gumball machines we can buy for the franchise, but the most important one of all,
Candy
of course,
Cadet.
is Candy Cadet, who actually winds up back in ruin. The lightning bolts also relate back to FNAF 6, as they're identical to the power-up that you collect in the Fruity Maze minigame. Or, like I said, they can relate to the lightning bolt on Glamrock Freddy's chest, an animatronic who many have theorized, myself included, has the soul of Michael Afton inside it. The stars and microphone call back to the 4 main Rockstar animatronics: Freddy, who holds the microphone, along with Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. The Sunny Hill, well, that's the iconic FNAF 6 gravestone ending, with all 5 of the missing children plus Charlie put to rest on the hill. Along with that, he'd be familiar with the 7th victim, his younger brother, the crying child, so if that's what these 7 dots represent, he'd understand that symbolism. Mike also has a strong love of pizza, as in the security logbook, he literally says it's the only reason to apply for the job, with hearts on other pages that look similar to the ones that are on the post-its over here. Then there's the footprints. In true classic FNAF theory fashion, Pikmin King X points out that these are 3-toed footprints, and they're almost identical to the ones that we see in the other FNAF 6 minigame, Midnight Motorist, where there are 2 3-toed footprints outside of a broken window, where Michael's either the escapee who broke out of that window, or the one sitting on the couch watching TV. The only thing unaccounted for here are the squiggly lines, but to me, that could just represent Ennard, or the Tangle, or whatever robot spaghetti this franchise wants to throw at the wall at this point. Could this mean that Michael might in fact be alive? That he's living inside the Pizzaplex trying to finish the job that he started? Maybe that's the entire reason the Sister Location room exists in the Pizzaplex in the first place. Maybe it's him talking to the recreation of his younger brother. Maybe he learned the language of the mimic that his father used to communicate with the monster that killed his sister, like we predicted in a previous theory. All signs here point to Michael, or not. Let me be perfectly clear. This is broad speculation based on a piece of evidence that has clearly not been solved yet. And honestly, that's why I need your help. You've seen all the theory threads that I've been pulling, all the site.
Bye-bye.
I've mastered all the rules for a surefire win.
25 minutes long.
You gotta break the rules when fighting bad guys.
Yep.
Come get your candy here, candy. Now I will tell you a story. A story about an end and a beginning and an end. There once was a boy covered in scars. He was so ashamed of his scars, he refused to look in a mirror. This lasted for so long. He eventually forgot they were ever there. Years passed until one day, this boy would come to the edge of a dark forest. There he saw a rabbit. He followed the rabbit as it scampered through the woods. They went over logs and around trees until he was eventually led to a beautiful flower. The scar-faced boy, now a grown man, plucked the flower to give to his daughter, but upon touching it, she died, for the flower was poisonous. And the man returns to the forest to play.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that encourages you to be mask off. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to conclude the year of FNAF. With Tales from the Pizzaplex books releasing every 2 months, the Ruin DLC released back in July, and the FNAF movie happening in October, 2023 really did feel like the classic days of FNAF all over again, where there was a new release happening every few months. And to end the year of FNAF on an insanely high note, Steelwall decided to pull one final trick out of the Scott Cawthon playbook. They released a second game within 6 months of ruin, the completely unexpected but very exciting sequel to FNAF VR Help Wanted. And let me tell you, they couldn't have released a more perfect game at a more perfect time. Because at a moment of peak frustration with the fanbase, when Foxy Stans and Bonnie Bros had all collectively thrown up their hands in desperation, this game swooped in to deliver the answers that they so desperately needed. If the narrative of FNAF is kind of like a cracked piece of pavement constantly on the verge of crumbling into dust, this game was the cement filling in the crevices, patching up all the holes in the narrative just enough to give the whole thing a solid foundation again, at least for another couple of months. And I really do mean that. Not since FNAF 6 has there been a Freddy's game so determined to tie up loose ends and deliver answers to the lingering questions that have been piling up in the background. Basically, Help Wanted 2 single-handedly put a close on one major story arc, while also opening the door to another, a next generation. It's an ending and a beginning, all in one, depicting a cycle of violence that shows that you're never truly out of the woods when you're in the world of FNAF. In short, it's probably the single most important game release in the last 6 years for this franchise. So today, we're gonna solve this game together to see what it's trying to tell us and where it's pointing the series moving forward. So grab your Faz wrenches and get ready to step into madness, theorists. Today,
You look like a
finally,
wrench.
we're gonna see what lies behind the mask.
Oh my god.
We're welcomed
Why
in
they
as
keep
a new
using that
employee of the
picture?
pizzeria.
Fazbear Entertainment is offering a new on-the-job training position for a future pizza professional.
And after that short intro, we're immediately thrust into a pizzeria hub world full of training minigames, all while Helpy cheers us forward from his little projector in the corner. But very quickly, one question starts to rear its ugly head. Who are we? Who are we playing as? Throughout the various mini-missions that we're presented with, one line that we hear repeated over and over again is, what makes you so special? 3 separate characters
Mystic
all bring
Hippo.
it up. Moon, Baby, even Mystic Hippo.
What makes you so special? What makes you so special? What makes you so special?
Considering everyone keeps asking us, we should probably have ourselves an answer ready for them, right? Well, we get a solid idea of who we might be thanks to plenty of explicit clues that are sprinkled throughout the game. First and foremost, we know that we're a Faz technician. Midway through the game, you unlock a Faz wrench that allows you to access a secret back area of the pizzeria. In that back room, there's a glowing tower that should look familiar to anyone who played through the Ruin DLC earlier this year, an inhibitor. Back in that game, these devices stopped you from being able to remove your AR-enabled Vanny mask. But that's silly. Why would that matter here? It's not like we're wearing a mask. Or are we? Sure enough, deactivating the tower allows you to reach up and remove the AR mask that's been stuck to your face since you first booted up the game. Suddenly, you see that this entire time you've been inside of a derelict pizzeria, worn down, decayed. And this isn't just any ruined pizzeria, it's the FNAF 6 location, complete with a recharge station and a Freddy spaghetti hole front and center. Not only is this just a fantastic mid-game twist that completely recontextualizes everything that you thought you knew about this game world, but it also helps confirm who we are and why we're down here. You see, us having a Vanny mask is weird, right? Like, who are we? Why would we have something like this in our possession? Well, it has to do with our job. In Ruin, Helpy tells us that these AR masks were worn to help technicians navigate through the destroyed Pizzaplex. Now, when I first saw that in the game, I was convinced that it was a trick just to get us to wear the mask and teach us the mechanics of this new game. But here we are in Help Wanted 2 in a destroyed Pizzaplex wearing a Vanny mask, and right there on the wall is a poster telling staff members to make sure they remove the mask at the end of the day. It proves that what Helpy was saying, at least in this moment, wasn't a trick. The mask is in fact a real tool that's used by Fazbear technicians, for as strange of a concept as that is. So we're a technician for the restaurant, sure, but that's not the only thing we know. Our next clue comes in the form of the Faz wrench. Midway through the game, you unlock this tool which allows you access to the back area of the pizzeria. Upon unlocking it, the Mystic Hippo Carney booth says that the key is familiar to us.
Look at Mr. Gumball.
It's familiar to you.
So we know that we're someone who's used this tool in the past. Immediately, that should bring to mind one person, Cassie's dad. Earlier this year in the Security Breach Ruin DLC, we were introduced to a young girl named Cassie, who goes on a mission to rescue her friend Gregory from the destroyed remains of the derelict Pizzaplex. Along the way, she too obtains a Faz wrench and says this.
A Faz wrench? It's just like my dad's.
It's a pretty explicit connection there, and that's not all. In the Fazzer Blast arcade games and Help Wanted 2, we repeatedly hear the Carney say this.
Now, you look like you got kids. Win a prize for the little one.
So we're a Faz tech who also happens to be a parent. Cassie's dad is literally the only character we know who truly fits the bill. But so what? What's the big deal if we're playing as Cassie's dad? It's not all that interesting. And you heard what Moon said.
What makes you so
special.
We're special in some way. And let me just make this perfectly clear. All dads are special, okay? They have very important roles in their kids' lives. That's something that makes him very special, at least in my book. But obviously we're talking about FNAF. The joys of parental responsibility, not what these characters are referring to. In a theory that I posted a couple months ago, I proposed that Cassie's dad wasn't just any technician. Instead, he was none other than the Bonnie Bro from
There is nothing like a Wendy's Frosty. It's cool.
Bonnie Bro from what?
It's creamy. It's only $1 right now. Wait, what? The one and only Frost Wendy's.
FNAF 4. You know, the kid that wears the Bonnie mask who helps Michael torture his crying brother to death. We know from Ruin's item descriptions that Cassie's dad's favorite character was Bonnie. In that game, we were also able to collect both an old school Foxy and Bonnie mask, which was an odd detail when you consider that there were no other OG animatronic masks present like Freddy or Chica, that seemed to be referencing the masks that both Michael Afton and Bonnie Bro were wearing on that fateful day in 1983. Those details, coupled with a few other things, led us to the whole Bonnie Bro conclusion. But now that the full game's out, it certainly seems definitive that our theory was right. You see, towards the end of Help Wanted 2, we're given the chance to light fires next to the gravestones of some very familiar missing children. Light them in a specific order, and you unlock a secret chest. A chest that contains none other than that old Bonnie mask. When you collect it, we see the text, "This looks familiar." It also unlocks an achievement called Lost Luggage. This right here, this was our mask. It was one that we thought was lost to time. One worn during that horrific accident of 1983. Speaking of that date, in order to find the game's secret ending, we have to unlock 6 creepy voodoo doll plushies, each one hidden behind very explicit in-game actions. In one, you go to Sister Location's private room and type in a very specific date. I bet you can guess what it is, 1983. And that year just keeps coming up. Multiple minigames take place during Fall Fest, which, in the previous VR Games DLC, was specifically called out as being in 1983. That is why we're considered special, because we were part of that fateful day. Because by killing the crying child, we sent William on a murderous rampage. It's a memory that we, as Bonnie Bro, have tried to repress. And that's not just me speculating. We know that Bonnie Bro has been actively trying to avoid these memories based on Mystic Hippo asking us this.
Do you remember?
It's also why when we collect one of the first secret voodoo plushies, we get a trophy in-game whose description reads, "Retrieve a memory." Basically, by playing this game and getting these secret objects, we're forcing ourselves to confront memories that we've buried deep in our psyche. We're coming to terms with the trauma of our past. We're accepting it as something that happened that cannot be changed, only atoned for. Which then brings us to the game's endings. If you play through the game normally just by completing the various minigames Helpy tasks you with, you eventually unlock the 6 members of the Faz Force, the FNAF universe version of the Transformers, because let's face it, at this point FNAF has literally parodied every IP known to mankind. Once you complete the collection, the lights flicker and suddenly a charging station appears, which opens up to reveal the hand of our dear friend Glitchtrap. Another flash, suddenly the nightmare staff bots appear, attacking you. Glitchtrap has won. He's tricked us. He's used Cassie's dad's love of collectibles against him. Much like the tapes in Help Wanted 1, these action figures contained parts of him, his memories, his essence. By gathering them all together, we've once again made Glitchtrap whole. With Princess Quest being the canon ending in Security Breach, it means that Glitchtrap lost his hold over Vanessa. He needed himself a new helper, so he lured us in, the last human employee remaining, and got us to put the pieces back together to reawaken him. The cycle once again repeats. That's why we see him reaching out of the charging station. Just like during the Burn Trap ending, he has enough strength to reawaken, to take control, and it's only then that the staff bots show up to kill us. But things aren't quite done yet. After our death, we change perspective into the eyes of a staff bot. And not just any staff bot. Specifically, we're looking through the eyes of the one who tells Cassie to take a mask at the beginning of Security Breach Ruin.
Take a mask. Take a mask.
It would seem like we've been absorbed into the system. Our consciousness is now part of this map bot. We're trapped inside of it, forced to execute its commands. In the ultimate of ironies, the mask that we were using to try and stop Glitchtrap becomes the mask that we now give our daughter as map bots. This is then what results in her getting that occipital implant. This is how Helpy gets into her mind, and this is eventually how the mimic gets free. To me, the way that you get this ending, it's highly symbolic. By not accepting our past, by ignoring and repressing the scars of our past actions. By not unlocking all those memory plushies, we've passed our mistakes forward. And in the process, we managed to doom our own daughter. Bonnie Bro didn't just ruin the life of one child, he wound up ruining two. Our actions have, in short, single-handedly prompted the events of ruin. But hold on, I just kind of glossed over a big detail there. We're attacked by a bunch of corrupted staff bots, and then suddenly we're in MapBot? How? It's kind of a big leap there, you know? Well, at first, I thought that we were just scanned into the system. The Mimic AI scanned our brains while we were wearing the Vanny mask, and boom, we're now stuck as part of the AI program running the whole Pizzaplex. But looking closer at the details, I think there's actually another explanation here. When you look at the MapBot through the Vanny mask in Ruin, it looks different from all the other staff bots that you encounter in the game. It looks more organic. You can actually see what appears to be a brain stuffed inside of its head. Compare that to how every other staff bot looks under that same AR lens, and it's completely different. Why would that be though? Well, it would appear as though our brain, or at the very least our organic matter, was stuffed inside of these robotic suits. It's part of what's powering this particular bot. But again, I ask, why? This seems to be such a random detail. Until you remember what a computer brain would be learning from studying Afton's behavior. Afton stuffs his victims into animatronic suits. That's what he did during the missing children's incident.
I don't want to sit here for another hour watching this stuff, bro.
It's what we see Glitchtrap doing at the end of Help Wanted 1, and apparently it's what he did to Bonnie Bro. He stuffed him into MapBot here. For a while, there's been a lot of confusion about the true nature of Glitchtrap. Is it a virus? Is it Afton in the Mimic AI? Was Burntrap the Mimic? It's largely been left unclear. But now I actually think this ending is trying to give us an answer. In the books, they make it explicitly clear that there are at least two mimics threatening the Pizzaplex. First, there's a physical mimic that's buried down in the basement that physically walks around and is able to kill people. Then there's the second version, a more general AI program that's eventually able to get installed to run the entirety of the Pizzaplex and is able to control and corrupt all the animatronics that work there. Is this confusing? Yeah. Is it frustrating? Most definitely. But I also now see what they were going for with the storyline. Remember how an AI works? You train it by feeding it situational data, and the data that goes in directly influences how it's going to behave moving forward. There's even an example of this with the Endo Daycare minigame in Help Wanted 2. You're teaching an AI program how to behave. Good data going in gives you good behavior. Bad data going in gives you chaotic behavior. In the books, we see the basement AI being trained up with a simple code. Rip off all the arms and legs of things that look humanoid. And it does this over and over again in epilogue after epilogue to each and every one of our teenage protagonists. The data that the basement AI was trained up on was simple and it was non-specific. But like a good program, it did exactly what it was told. Ripped off all those limbs. Now compare that to the Pizzaplex AI. This was trained using a lot more data. It was told to copy the behavior of actual humans, and so it learned coded languages. It learned a wider series of gestures and behaviors. It learned how to play games and hang up clothing. It was far more sophisticated. So by having two different versions of the Mimic in the books, what we're really seeing are different ways that an AI can be trained up and how the behavior spins off of that. So how's that all apply to the games? Well, in Ruin, there's a key moment on the catwalks of Monty Gator Golf that show two entities working together, but also acting separately, as they're able to argue against each other. Helpy says, "I took care of the situation," to which the Mimic responds, they're cut from the same cloth. They both started as the Mimic program, but they've evolved in different ways. And based on all of that, I suspect that the Mimic Cassie runs from at the end of Ruin is a parallel for the book's basement AI, a simpler, older system that uses Gregory's voice to talk to us throughout Ruin. This one just exists and executes two simple goals: kill things and escape from the basement. But then there's the Pizzaplex AI. I suspect that this is the more sophisticated system. This is the one that's been trained up on Afton's data specifically. It's the one that embodies itself as Glitchtrap, and it's also the one that speaks to us in the form of Helpy. And we know this to be true because of what we see throughout Help Wanted 2. In this one game, the AI is drawing from pretty much every past animatronic, including characters like Scrap Baby and Lefty, which are odd pulls considering they're characters that were never put on display for the public. These were characters that only existed for the fake pizzeria made to entrap Afton in FNAF 6. So the fact that the system here knows about them means that they had to have come from Afton's mind. It's also why in the Helpy Hospital minigames, we see a kid's drawing of a burning pizza restaurant with Helpy running away. That's how Afton was able to escape and live on. His consciousness was contained within the Helpy AI, which was able to survive the FNAF 6 fire. And remind me again, who is the one that encourages us to play these minigames throughout Help Wanted 2? The minigames that lead to the collection of the Faz Force toys, which ultimately give us the bad ending? Oh yeah, it's Helpy. And not just any Helpy either. Helpy spelled with an I. That spelling detail actually matters. You see, the name of the physical digital animatronic helpy, it's spelled H-E-L-P-Y. But in Ruin, that digital neural implant helpy is spelled H-E-L-P-I. And once you know it, in the game files for Help Wanted 2, the helpy on the projector screen is once again spelled with an I. This is Glitchtrap, the mimic program trained up on Afton's data. He's yet again trying to put the pieces back together, and by completing his tasks and unlocking the Faz Force, you help him to succeed. He's now back in full control of the Pizzaplex, ready for Ruin, ready to create a new servant in Cassie to finish what Vanessa started. But if I've learned anything from Steel Wool, it's that you can't always trust the first ending you see. Remember that creepy plushie that we unlocked earlier? Well, there are 6 of them in total, each one unlocked via a seemingly random series of actions. Put a code into the whack-a-mole game backwards. Make a weird soda mixture only during a complete electrical shutdown of the factory. Shoot a random rocket ship during various Phaser Blast minigames until you get to FNAF 2, at which point you pop balloon recreations of the animatronics to unlock a final boss battle against a cutout of Springtrap. Like I said, these get bizarre and they get convoluted in a hurry. But the main thing you need to know about them is that by collecting them, you unlock a glitched coin that allows you to play the 4th and final version of Princess Quest's arcade cabinet. At first, it plays just like your normal Princess Quest minigame. You swing your sword, you kill the glitchy bunnies, you collect the keys. Simple. At least until it's not. You open a door and you suddenly find yourself standing next to someone playing an arcade cabinet. Next thing you know, the princess is standing there in the room with you.
Are you kidding me? Oh, this is nuts.
The real world and the digital world are leaking into each other. Reach into the screen, grab your sword, and suddenly you are the princess.
Who's the princess now?
Glowing sword in hand, we fight our way through the glitching bunnies until we meet the old Red King. We give him our Vanny mask, and in return, he gives us the Glitchtrap plushie from Help Wanted 1. And this is where things go really off the rails. Out of nowhere, the sister location elevator appears. Hop in, and suddenly it takes us inside of a giant claw machine with a giant Vanny staring in at us. We offer up the Glitchtrap plushie, revealing the true Glitchtrap. She crushes him and then fades into darkness. Doing so unlocks a trophy named Consequences. The description reads, System threats found, repair complete. So, what was all that? Well, actually it seems pretty explicit. Glitchtrap was the system threat. By crushing him, he's been deleted and the wider AI system's been repaired. We won! Except, is that possible? Didn't I just say that the other ending showed us the start of Ruin? For that game to exist, which we know it does, Glitchtrap has to survive here. So is this secret ending not canon then? Just a cool reveal with no substance? No, actually, I don't believe so. For the first time ever in this franchise's history, I, Matt Pat, believe that both endings are canon. Let me explain. I do think that we're destroying Glitchtrap in the Vanny ending, but I'm not exactly sure it's a system-wide removal. Instead, I suspect that this ending is specifically about Vanessa herself. We've known since the original Help Wanted that Vanessa, Glitchtrap, and Princess Quest have all been inextricably connected. For those of you who don't remember, the Princess Quest minigame originated back in the 2D version of Help Wanted, where they needed a game to replace the original mechanic of piecing together the missing 16 tapes from Tape Girl. Here, we watch as Vanessa, the princess, falls victim to Glitchtrap. In Security Breach, you beat Princess Quest 3, which shows Glitchtrap being defeated and Vanessa walking out of the Pizzaplex freed, leaving the Vanny mask behind. So the fact that we're now playing Princess Quest again tells me that we're not fighting to remove Glitchtrap from the Pizzaplex system. Instead, we're yet again fighting specifically.
I'm not a detective. They said I was consistently reckless. Why can't you just hide behind a desk in here? I wouldn't even be doing any work.
To free Vanessa. These games have always been about Vanessa and Glitchtrap. I wouldn't expect 4 to deviate from that pattern. Even my old buddy Candy Cadet's trying to tell us that this game is about finishing Vanessa's story. Throughout Help Wanted 2, you collect coins that can then be traded to Candy Cadet for pieces of a story. His second one tells about a young woman that's been lured in by a friendly voice, only for it to have been a witch that tries to eat her.
Now let me tell you a story about a young woman who, when she was little, was led into a dark forest by a witch and almost eaten.
She manages to escape, but she's permanently scarred in the process. When she's older, she returns and is met by a young boy who offers to help.
When she had grown, she sought revenge on the witch and entered the forest again willingly. She was greeted at the mouth of the forest by a young boy who offered to help guide her through the darkness. She welcomed the help and followed the young boy over the river, through the jagged trees, and toward a small house. She followed the boy into the house. The oven door closed. The witch would finally have her meal.
This right here, this is Vanessa's story, cut and dry. She was lured in by what she thought was a friendly voice, Tape Girl, telling her to gather the tapes to stop Glitchtrap, only for Glitchtrap to then take control. She does escape, but is permanently scarred by this. She has the Glitchtrap virus inside of her. It's not in full control, but it's definitely there, which is what we hear about in the emails from FNAF AR and the retro CDs from Security Breach.
I compartmentalized him. He's locked away.
She had compartmentalized him. He wasn't in in full control, at least not yet. She then comes back to try to kill Glitchtrap herself, but runs into a young boy who seems like he's gonna help her, only to lure her deeper under Glitchtrap's control. By the time she transfers to the Pizzaplex, Vanessa's tone has changed in her therapy tapes.
I'm needed somewhere else now. Thank you.
We see the same thing in the FNAF AR emails. She's no longer in control. Glitchtrap has completely taken over, and it's all thanks to the only little boy that we know of, Gregory. Thanks to his retro CDs, we know that he was meeting a person in a bunny costume.
You're talking to someone or something. It's hard to tell. What are those things? They almost look like rabbit ears.
Gregory is a villain. At the very least, he was at some point in the story. That is clear as day. Between this Candy Cadet story, GGY, and the fact that he was clearly working with Vanny before the events of Security Breach, he is not on our side. He was the one that helped Glitchtrap to take full control of Vanessa, right up until the end of Security Breach. Even cut lines of dialogue from Help Wanted 2 seem to support our conclusion here. These voice lines come directly from Vanessa, and they tell us the following. Quote, you need to listen to me carefully. Don't help it escape. It's using you to finish where she left off. Only a small piece of his code remains. Vanessa is back to being more in control, but she knows that a small part of him remains. The Glitchtrap plushie that started it all back in Help Wanted. We also get lines like, the memories are freed. Use the token. Bring him to me. Referencing the memory plushies that we're collecting, the glitched Princess Quest token, and then being told to bring the plushie to her so that she can crush it herself once and for all. Destroying Glitchtrap inside of her mind allows that other persona, Vanny, to finally fade into darkness. Vanessa is truly free. And we know this to be true because after this ending, when you go back to the main hub screen, Helpy's gone, replaced by a boy claiming that the Fazbear pizza tastes like real cheese. Delicious for him, but even tastier is the fact that Helpy's been purged. Glitchtrap is gone. At least he's gone from this version of the program. And you see, this is what I meant about endings and beginnings. This to me feels like a very specific end, the end of Vanessa's story, and with it, the end of this current era of FNAF, from Help Wanted 1 to Help Wanted 2. Let's call it the Vanessa arc. She's no longer a part of this story. Her battle's over. We saved her completely. But in closing out her story, the cycle also repeats. Yet again, we have ourselves an innocent girl, this time named Cassie, being lured in by a seemingly friendly voice, Gregory. But in reality, it's all a trap. Thanks to that occipital implant, she now has Helpy as a part of her mind, just like Vanessa did with Glitchtrap. And now she's wearing the mask more and more frequently, again like Vanny. In short, it's been passed on.
We're open.
No, didn't Vanny make that?
Cassie is just Vanessa 2.0. Gone is the era of Vanessa and Glitchtrap. Long live Cassie and the Mimic AI. At this point, the only question is, what's it truly gonna take to break this cycle once and for all? But hey, I'm gonna continue digging for deeper lore and winning all these.
I'm gonna watch 1 minute.
I was right about the origins of Freddy's. In Help Wanted 2, we get a number of references to Fall Fest 1983 from the Curse of Dreadbear DLC. The Fazcade is set there. We get this poster in the back of the claw machine. So naturally, when I saw this poster on the back wall, I just brushed it off as another reference to the DLC, at least until I saw the date, 1970. Hold on, what? Ow. Before this, the earliest date that we had for the franchise was from the Silver Eyes, where we were told that Fredbear's Family Diner started in 1979, but that would mean that either Fall Fest was a Fazbear event prior to the start of the diner, which feels weird, or that Fall Fest wasn't originally a Fazbear property. And in our FNAF timeline, that's exactly what I theorized. I pointed out this ticket that we received for Fredbear's Singin' Show, and how it looked like a ticket for a traveling circus act, the show that would inspire Afton to create the original animatronics. Seems like I may have been on the right track all along. This poster definitely looks like old traveling circus posters from the same era. So I may have been a little off about the year, but it seems like Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that deserves its own semi-canon novelization. Friends, it feels like some sort of cruel joke. The Five Nights at Freddy's movie came and went from theaters. It was fun. It did great financially, and we all had ourselves a grand old time. We moved on, and now we wait patiently for the next installment to drop where Mike seeks help for a sleeping disorder, and Freddy and friends take their fort-building business on the road to turn it into a major real estate venture. Everything was in balance, as it should be. And yet, they couldn't just leave well enough alone, could they? Because just like clockwork for this franchise, they turned the movie into a book. A book! Even though I announced my final episodes, I still couldn't get out of this thing fast enough, could I? Even though all the book releases were technically done for the franchise, after 22 solid books, and that's not even including the graphic novels and all the other spin-off materials, good old Scotty Cawthon found a way to squeeze one more in on me before my foot was out the door. And you know what I did? I read the thing. And I gotta say, I'm glad that I did, because let me tell you, it is a theorist gold mine. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today to tell you that the FNAF movie book... that the FNAF movie book... Oh, I can't even say it. It physically makes me ill to acknowledge that something like this exists. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand here today to tell you that the book version of the FNAF movie, it tells us everything about where the film spin-off series is headed to next. And perhaps more importantly than anything, it tells us that the big reveal of Chapter 3 is gonna be that Vanessa is a robot. Yeah, I know. You may now commence throwing things angrily at your computer monitor. So while you're busy getting yourself an angry arm workout, what am I talking about exactly? Well, I don't know if you're aware of this, but it's not uncommon for films to get themselves what are known as movie novelizations. Basically a book that retells the exact same story as a movie, but because it's a book, there tend to be additional details thrown in to bulk things out. Insight into characters, their thoughts, their motivations, more descriptions of scenes, things like that. As you might imagine, novelizations
I'm gonna watch this one,
really
and then either tonight or tomorrow
experience at their house. Nowadays, though,
morning,
it's more of an additional source of found revenue for a movie. You already got yourself a script written after all, so you might as well
watch this for 3 hours and get bored.
Slap a cover on it, probably just recycle
Yeah,
some
watch
old
this last
promotional
one.
artwork, and boom, you just made yourself a couple
If you're
extra
free
bucks
tonight,
from
I'll finish
hardcore
it up
fans
tonight.
and the collectors. So of course, when the FNAF movie got itself one, I was legally bound to read through it with the hope and expectation that there might be some juicy lore hidden inside of its pages.
I'm not even
Let me
gonna try
tell you,
that.
I was not
I
disappointed.
wasn't
It was
trying
like
to say lore the way
experiencing
he
the
used to.
movie through some sort of weird multiverse. For instance, I am actually
Oh my god, why does it keep using that picture? Dude, is this a real picture of Matt
movie
Pat?
through some sort of weird multiverse. For instance, I
This has to be cross-eyed Matt Pat. That has to be a real
I'm
picture.
actually in the book. Well, Ness, my character from the movie. The catchphrase is in there and everything. It is really cool. I'm described as a, quote, tall, lanky, auburn-haired teen. I appreciate that book. You know what they say, the camera adds 10 pounds, but the novelization removes 20 years. That said, on the subject of learning more lore, apparently, and I didn't even know this as the guy who was playing the character, Ness is supposedly the son of the diner's owner, whose name is, in fact, Sparky. And that right there, that's a pretty interesting detail when you consider that there's a dog animatronic who we've all been assuming is Sparky hidden in the back of Freddy's Pizzeria. It is a super unusual detail that gets just a little bit more explanation and a bit more insight, all thanks to the novel. So, I'm the son of a fake animatronic dog. File that one in my character bio right alongside my undying love for Doug the lawyer. Or maybe not. You see, Doug in the books, he is a very different character. The diner scene straight up features him openly creeping on Maxine, enough so that she thinks of him as a total sleazeball. Let's just say that he's hungry for more than just the apps. Thankfully, this is one of the precious few times that Scott Cawthon has stepped in to set the record straight, explaining that this gross version of my best shipmate is in fact non-canon, and that this scene will be altered in all future printings of the novelization. In short, Nug lives on. Or would you consider death? But you can already see how having more words on the page gives you tons of additional context to what you're seeing on the screen, and likely more insight into the original intent of these sorts of moments. And as you might imagine, if small bit players like Doug and I are getting lore drops from the books, then the main characters are also getting a lot of extra info in there as well. For instance, in the movie, it was lightly implied that Maxine had a bit of a crush on Mike. I picked it up right here, where she subtly signals that she wants him to put a ring on it.
I wish someone would buy me a ring.
It's not a big plot point, but you can tell that there's a bit more under the surface
You
of this
gotta go?
interaction. In the book, though, it goes from subtle
Alright, I'll
subtext
go.
into a
yeah, I don't know if you're in, but either if you're free tonight, let me know on the Discord if you're free tonight. I kind of want to finish this up today, or if I can. If you're not able to tonight, I'll do it tomorrow morning. How's that sound?
full-on plot point. She constantly dresses up for Mike, dropping tons of hints about her interest, growing more and more frustrated with Mike as he's completely oblivious to her advances. In fact, it's actually part of her motivation for spying on him for Aunt Jane, which she also feels very regretful for in the books, unlike the film where she just kind of looks sad out of a window for a bit. Another huge detail about the main characters, Mike is more of a theorist in the book than he was in the film, actively taking on more of the responsibility for unraveling the mystery. He independently does research. He even discovers the missing children's incident by himself instead of just being told about it by Vanessa later on in the film. I guess they just had to remove that part of the character from the film lest he get compared to the performances coming from other established theorists in the community. Okay, so that's obviously a bunch of random observations and details, adding a bit more texture to these characters that either got cut for time or glossed over in a more visual storytelling medium. But there is so much more packed into this book, enough so that I believe that we can figure out exactly where the story of the next 2 movies is headed. And it all
I want to know about
begins
the
with
3.
the hill that apparently I'm going to be dying on for my final FNAF theories,
Oh.
a human human being a robot. Don't hate the player, hate the game.
I thought I was gonna die.
I'm not the one making up the story here, friends. I just interpret the clues as best I can. But in this case, we don't have ourselves a robot boy. Instead, we have ourselves a robot cop, Vanessa. Vanessa is a robot.
Yo, what is he doing with his game? Yo, Scott is like, yeah, why does her face look like that as it hangs? He's like, oh, here's this robot kid. Charlie. Here's the 4 versions of her. Here's this robot kid, Gregory. And he's not a good guy. And now, in the movie, Vanessa's a robot.
And I suspect she's not going to be the only one. No, obviously that is a huge claim to make, so let's start backing it up, shall we?
There's gonna be more than one robot.
About how film Afton seems to be much
They must love making robot people. I'm gonna start, like, tasing everyone.
further along in his understanding of the possessed animatronics than either his game or book counterparts. For instance, he knows that they operate based off the pictures that are hung on the wall. What have you done? He knows that, as he's dying, he needs to be wearing the golden bodysuit in order for his soul to survive by bonding to the metal.
I always come back.
He even seems to have a rudimentary understanding of Remnant based on the existence of that weird torture Freddy mask. I mean, seriously, these animatronics are not inventing a device like this. It has to have been man-made. In fact, the novelized version of the movie's Cold Open suggests exactly this.
I'm putting on my
Prologue the
sunglasses.
book very closely, you learn that Bob,
I'm taking
the
off my
security guard whose
sunglasses.
death opens the film, had already figured out that he was nothing more.
It should have been Markiplier. He was working on his own movie, so he couldn't even do it.
More than a lamb for the
Didn't have the
slaughter
time.
in this job. First, his internal monologue acknowledges that he had been hired to guard the pizzeria. It's written expressly in sarcastic scare quotes there, showing that he knows very well that the job was never meant to be real. And as he's being dragged to his death by the animatronics, he passes by the kid's drawing of Afton holding the kid's hands. And we read that bile fills his throat in this moment. He knows that that picture and the rabbit specifically is the reason that he's currently fighting for his life. In short, the extra details in the prologue of the novelization strongly suggest that Afton is actively hiring guards to this pizzeria to harvest a remnant from them so he can continue on with his experiments. And he's using his control over the animatronics to help make all of this happen. And because of that, despite this being an adaptation of one of the earliest FNAF stories, Film Afton is likely already tinkering with much more advanced animatronic technology. Again, look no further than the cold open of the novel. The torture Freddy mask isn't just an old repurposed Freddy head like it is in the movie. Instead, it's described
He looks
like
so
this.
weird.
Quote, the two halves of the bear face peeled back like the wings of a beetle, expanding outward. As the fur parted, spinning robotic mechanisms filled Bob's vision.
Like one of the I know he's about to say it, but like one of the dislocation
of how the mask operates with pieces that split apart and fold out is actually much more fitting of a different generation of animatronic, the Funtime animatronics.
Oh, yeah,
and what do we
Funtime.
see in FNAF 5? The game where these Funtimes take center stage? Down in Afton's bunker, we see articulating humanoid robot heads, eyes constantly blinking. They're alive and they're watching us. And these aren't just set decorations either. These heads are important enough to have been directly called out by the FNAF character encyclopedia. In the game prior, FNAF 4, Afton's final line was, "I will put you back together." And in FNAF 5, we see exactly that. A bunker made by Afton full of robotic humanoids. A mad scientist of a man trying to use his robotic skills to bring a human back to life.
Baby's face on the clock. It's like a pizza.
A mad scientist of a man trying to use his robotic skills to bring a human back to life. To put his
Wait a minute. The eyes on that clock are green.
mad scientist of a man trying to use his robotic skills to bring a human back to life, to put his loved ones back together, literally. Going back to the movie, this is likely why we see a humanoid animatronic with teeth, silver eyes, and an arm with 5 articulated human fingers buried in the parts and services room. It's not just an Easter egg put there from scraps laying around the Jim Henson office. This looks like it's a first-generation robot person. So we have an Afton that's already harvesting and experimenting with Remnant at the beginning of this film. And we know that there's a human-shaped robot buried in the parts and services room that suggests that he might have been working on some sort of human prototype. That right there, though, is still a long way away from creating a convincing enough robot that it's able to fool literally everyone around it. And why then would it be Vanessa, of all people? Well, the first thing I'd like to talk about here is actually something that jumped out to me the first time I watched the movie, the performance of Vanessa's actress, Elizabeth Lale. Something I noticed throughout the movie was how aloof and disconnected Vanessa seemed. Her voice was always flat, her character almost always stoic.
The new security guard?
Yeah.
You're bleeding, by the way.
You and Abby, you still have each other.
From where I sit, I'd say you're lucky.
And for the times that she actually did show emotion, she was flipping on a dime, seemingly out of nowhere.
Take care of your sister.
You can do whatever you want with your own life, but if you ever bring Abby back here again, I will shoot you.
Considering the character that she's based on from the games, you'd think that she might be more bubbly or energetic.
Dang, why is she so aggressive about that? Like, What?
Life, but if you ever bring Abby back here again, I will shoot you.
Considering the character that
That ain't legal. There's a cop.
she's based on from the games,
Dang.
you'd think that she might be more bubbly
Still
or
reacting.
energetic based on how she was in Security Breach.
Hello, little boy. If you're down here, say something.
Hey, little man. Do you know what time it is? The doors are open. Why are you still here?
And this isn't meant to be some sort of critique on Elizabeth Lale's performance or anything like that. We know that she's a talented actor. I mean, just check out some of the clips of her playing Anna in the show Once Upon a Time.
He's Prince Charming, and you're Snow White, and those things sound terrible, but they also sound romantic. What is that amazing smell? Chocolate!
No, the flatter delivery from her has to have been an intentional direction that she was given. Perhaps direction
They made a
sound bit
live-action
more
Frozen
robotic.
movie?
In the novelization, Vanessa seems to shift personalities on a dime, changing between what Mike describes as the bubbly girl mode and the intensely serious cop mode. For example, during their first night meeting, we get this, quote, "Then someone invisible flipped a switch. Vanessa's cop mode deactivated." That right there, it's a pretty suspicious way of phrasing a psychological change like that. Intentionally using robotic language in this franchise? Yeah, press X to doubt. The same thing happens towards the end of the movie too, where after Vanessa's stabbed by Afton, Abby notices this. Quote again, "Vanessa's eyes looked
There was
weird,
no
but they were
blood
lights that were having
either.
a hard time staying on." And speaking of both Vanessa's eyes and her personality shifts, the absolute biggest piece of evidence here, Vanessa's eyes literally change color when she shifts personalities. Check it out, again from the book, page 144. Right after Mike tells Vanessa about his Garrett kidnapping dreams, quote, "The narrowing of the eyes, the stiffening of her mouth, she was back in cop mode." No, Mike thought, it wasn't cop mode, it was something else. Vanessa's irises deepened noticeably in hue. They went from their usual soft, almost grayish blue to a deeper indigo. The color shift was so pronounced that it almost looked computer generated. Computer generated, huh? What a choice of words that is. An indigo, you say? You mean the color that some would confuse with purple? But perhaps
Purple,
the single
God.
most telling part
Why
of
is he saying purple?
indigo, you say? You mean the color that some would confuse with purple? But perhaps the single most telling part of this little paragraph comes in the final line. It was enormously disquieting. Mike felt like he was watching a human turning into, and then he trails off, not having a chance to finish the thought. Turning into what, Mike? Turning into what? A robot, perhaps? And this thing with the eyes, it isn't just a one-off change, it is a consistent part of Vanessa's character descriptions throughout the entire novel, while explaining how spring locks work. Quote, "Vanessa's irises did the light blue to dark blue thing. Her eyes had turned an even deeper blue, navy blue now, almost black. As Vanessa's explaining her father's creations like the spring locks, again, the eyes get darker, sometimes purple and sometimes black. It's almost as if she's fallen back on some sort of Afton-designed programming, almost like he's controlling her. In fact, every time Vanessa tries to do something to keep Mike from looking into this mystery and uncovering Afton's secrets, her eyes go to this darker color. In the scene next to the storm drain where she tries to convince Mike not to try sleeping and dreaming of Freddy anymore, her eyes are dark blue. In the same scene, as Mike tries to get Vanessa to open up so he can get to know her better, he notices that her eyes grow darker and become blurred. And then something, in quotes, breaks any connection that they're forming. And yet, when she's begging for him not to go to Freddy's at all, to save himself and Abby, again, quote, "He looked into her eyes, so soft and blue right now that it seemed like some of her essence, life force, was leaching from her." If there's some Afton-driven programming controlling Vanessa, that would also explain one of the stranger moments from the film. After Mike is attacked by the animatronics and saved by Vanessa, she reveals the dark secrets of her past and the pizzeria. When Mike asks her to help save Abby, though, she declines. Not because she doesn't want to help, but because she feels like she literally can't.
Come with me.
No, if he's there, I won't be any use to you. Believe me.
And when she does show up to the pizzeria later on, once confronted by Afton, she's only able to bring herself to shoot once before completely freezing up, kind of like a computer that's crashed. Even my favorite line of the movie,
You had one job. Keep him in the dark and kill him if he got too close.
That's 2 jobs.
is a robotic, process-driven answer. And before you say that Vanessa can't be a robot because we see her get stabbed and have to go to the hospital, yeah, that's admittedly the biggest point against the theory. That said, remember the franchise that we're talking about here, friends? These robots can be so lifelike, so realistic that you cannot tell them apart from real humans at all. They eat, they sleep, they breathe, they can even bleed like Charlie does in the original FNAF book trilogy. I get that the FNAF franchise tends to be cryptic, but time and time again, there have been signs that someone in this franchise is a robot. Maybe it was Gregory from Security Breach. We know for a fact that Charlie from the book trilogy was, Jessica from Frailty, Billy from B7, Sarah from To Be Beautiful, the list goes on and on and on. They are hitting us over the head time and again with these kids who become robots. And if I just keep saying that one of these characters is in fact an animatronic, eventually I will be right. Right? Right.
Yeah.
This would even make some strange imagery from
Call
the
all
games
animatronics,
make more
and then
sense.
you'll be
Remember
at
the
least
unmasked
one of
ending
them.
from Security Breach? No, of course not. Why would you? Well, in it, we see two Vanessas. One who's fallen to the ground and died, while another's still up on the roof of the building looking down at the scene. This was always weird, and we as a FNAF community just kind of politely ignored it. But it suddenly makes a lot more sense if Vanessa is in fact a robot. This is just two recreations of the same model. One became active the second the other one died, which again is something that we see happening in the original novel trilogy with Charlie bots. But why? Sure, Afton might be creepy, and he's even creepier in the book, but why go through all of this trouble? Keep the pizzeria up and running, hire new guards to farm Remnant from, create an animatronic as human as Vanessa? Why is he doing it? Well, the answer seems to be staring us in the face throughout the movie. It's this. The Ella Springlock suit in the back. Think about it. Vanessa's incredibly cautious around this animatronic in the film, warning Mike not to go near it and going as far as threatening to shoot him if he brings Abby back to the pizzeria. If she loves all these animatronics so much, why is she so cautious about this one? Well, what if it already killed someone? Someone Vanessa knows very well. Someone like herself. Afton's daughter, the original Vanessa. I believe that in his desire to create the best animatronics possible, Afton created this Ella Springlock animatronic, and it ended up killing his own daughter. Just like what we see happen with Baby in the games. That is where his obsession started. His desire to find the secrets of life after death. He wanted to rebuild his daughter, and in the process, he discovered Remnant, how to create it, the pain required for it. That's why he built the torture device with the green Freddy mask, and made sure that it was close to the Ella animatronic in the parts and services room. Afton wanted to infuse the suit with Remnant, all in the hopes of bringing back his real Vanessa. Eventually, he was able to build the Vanessa that we see in the movie, but even then, she's difficult. She rebels. She doesn't want to help him as much, especially when children like Abby get involved. It's not his real Vanessa, and so Afton will keep trying and trying and trying. And if I'm right about this, it tells us a huge amount about where the franchise is headed in the next film. In our last theory, we suggested that Mike's brother Garrett is likely the identity of the puppet in the films, and will probably be the centerpiece of the second movie. I mean, the credits literally end with the puppet telling both Mike and the audience to come find me. However, this is gonna be a problem for Mike, Abby, and Vanessa. You see, Afton has a strange connection with Garrett. In the book, Garrett actually appears in the pizzeria during the final battle, luring Mike to a more secluded area where Afton can ambush him. Afton has control over Garrett's spirit in the scene, enough so that Garrett literally melts into the shadows that Afton emerges from. Quote from the book, "It was as if Garrett became part of the gloaming under the archway. He was there, and then he was something else. In Garrett's place, someone in a rabbit costume appeared. Not just someone, a man. So if Afton controls Garrett's spirit, it's likely that the puppet is going to be the villain of the second film, creating a whole new conflict for Mike to overcome. And then if the third movie follows the third game, an undead Afton will be back as the main antagonist, with the grand reveal that he's been able to make robot people the entire time. Vanessa will be revealed to be a robot, and Afton will tempt Mike with exactly what he wants. He could put Garrett back together as a robot kid, exactly the way Mike remembered him as a child, just as Afton did with his daughter. All Mike has to do is help Afton with his evil experiments, and Mike then will be left with a choice. Just how badly does he want his brother back? Guess we'll have to watch the movie, and then read the corresponding 8-book series released afterward to find out. But hey, even though Vanessa might be mechanical, there's one thing I know she'd be able to appreciate, the sponsor of today's episode, Air Up. The water bottle.
Alright, guys. I wanted this to be the finale, but it's not gonna be because this takes way too long. I mean, I've been streaming for about, let's see, 3.5 hours. I mean, just watching this. I mean, with 3 more episodes. I'm not watching another hour right now. I'm not. So tonight, possibly, I will stream the last part. If not tonight, then tomorrow morning, just before I start my Sarah is Missing, meaning I will have to start early. Anyways, if I stream tonight, you guys, if you guys subscribe and turn on the bell, then yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed this stream, and see you in the next one. Bye.